how bad can 8 to 12 miles really be? Well, it can be pretty bad for those wondering. Filming kayak camping is literally just my favorite thing to film.
This is Gatewood Brown, the adventurous soul behind the lens of his self-titled YouTube channel. Follow along as we dive into his captivating backstory and how he got into kayak camping. Welcome, Gatewood.
Russell, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I wish Jose could have been a part of this one, but really stoked to have a conversation and talk outdoors, fly fishing, kayak camping, gear, whatever else we dive into, making videos. I love all those things. So
yeah, there's definitely some of that on both of our ends. You're actually the main inspiration for me to want to go kayak camping. So
really?
I oddly enough, so I came across your YouTube channel after I had already been following you on Instagram and stuff. So Jose had a remote designs bag. For those of y'all who don't know, Gatewood Brown is remote designs. They're one and together. And so Jose had a remote designs bag, the zipped backpack that you had. And he had it, and I really liked it, and he was telling me about it. And I said, man, I'm going to go ahead and order me one. So I ordered a tan one and just looked you up on Instagram because I always like to take pictures of products that I use, whether I'm promoting them or not. It's just something I enjoy doing. And so I followed you on Instagram at that point. And then I was wanting to go camping from my kayak over on Lake Washita, which you've been to, right? And so I was like, well, let me just try to look up some tip videos for kayak camping. And then I come across Gatewood Brown on YouTube, and I had no clue that that was you. I just knew you as Remote Designs. And so I was watching it, and I saw one of your slow-mo videos on the intro, and it had a Remote Designs bag. And I was like, dude, they have a Remote Designs bag. Like, what's up with this? And then so I started watching the video, and that's when I realized, I was like, oh, that's who that is. So it was kind of a backwards way for me to find you than I would have expected to. And went through watching most of your videos, picking up tips and tricks, and trying to learn from mistakes that you had made, so I don't end up on the downside of an unfortunate event, because I am known to do that. So you're the main reason why I even started to try to go kayak camping in the first place.
Well, that is super rad to hear. Obviously, very humbled by that. It's kind of cool to, you make videos, upload them, and then sometimes it'll impact people enough to go out and do kind of try to replicate the same thing. And it's great that you're watching the how-to videos, because honestly, that's kind of how I got started too, was, all right, yeah, I guess we can, if you want to, we can just dive into the story of how I got into kayak camping, just because starting with Lake Washita, which that was a trip that I loved. It's beautiful island camping, something that you'd find seemingly out in the Caribbean, clear water, rocky islands, and beautiful fall foliage. But it would feel weird to start there, just because there's so much that led up to that point, so much that happened first. And kind of where it started was going back to growing up in childhood. So I've always lived in the city. I was born in Louisville, Kentucky, and then we moved down to Houston, Texas, which is where I currently reside, when I was 6 years old. And so despite the fact that I live in Houston and Louisville, kind of both cities, there's always a huge emphasis by my mom and dad to get us outside, because they were both raised in the countryside of Kentucky. And so it was kind of like, all right, you may be city slickers, but we're going to make sure you know both worlds. And so I can really honestly thank my parents for both of that. And so, for most of my childhood, it was going out to a farm or something and just stomping around. And that was going on hikes and just getting into trouble with my siblings, a brother and sister. And, so that was really fun. That was super enjoyable, but, you wouldn't really call it outdoors. You would just call it growing up on a farm, kind of on the weekends or whatever. And so I would say right around, like, of course, everybody does Boy Scouts, and you do some limited camping there at state parks and whatnot, but nothing too intense in elementary school. And then in middle school, it was kind of time for me to go off to summer camp, and, something my parents were passionate about. And now that I look at the prices of summer camp, I'm like, oh man, hey, thanks mom and dad for sending me to that, because these camps are lots of dinero, very
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so they were looking at camps to send us, and with our Kentucky connections, there's some people that really enjoy to camp in Western North Carolina, kind of like Asheville area. So up in the mountains there, and it was known to be kind of a rustic camp, very nice camp, but very much you're going to get outdoors and do stuff that your parents probably aren't making you, even though I know a lot of parents will go backpacking and whatnot, fishing with their kids. But
Mhm.
um, this was I guess what you would call a mountaineering camp. So they would have canoeing, hiking, backpacking, mountain biking, horseback riding, swimming, and some other stuff. And they're nestled right there in the mountains of North Carolina. And so, as a part of that camp, it was interesting. You had to do at least one 3-day trip that was outside of the camp. And so, what that usually entailed was you had to come to camp with a hiking backpack and your tent, sleep bag, air pad, all the stuff that you would need to go on a backpacking trip. And you had to do at least one of those. You could do more. And it was a 3-week camp.
Oh
And
wow.
so that was kind of like my first exposure to backpacking, where you load all your gear onto your back, you get to step in, and when you make it to camp, sit down, set up your tent, and do all this other stuff. So, things that we had kind of done in Boy Scouts, but you drive to location instead of walking in. So
Mhm.
I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And what's funny is, although I really enjoyed the backpacking aspect, it wasn't until I went on a canoe camping trip with that same summer camp that my eyes were open. I was like, why did I enjoy this canoe camping trip so much more than the backpacking trip? Like, I distinctly remember things about that trip way more than I do the hiking trips. And what that was on, I'm pretty sure, Lake Fontana, where we had a big group, 2 kids, two per canoe. You would put all your gear into the boat, and then we kayaked across the lake up into one of the arms up a creek,
Mhm.
and then used one of the backcountry campsites, and that's where we set up. And that was a 3-day trip as well. So one day tripping in, setting up camp, another day exploring kind of the area, doing some of the hiking trails. Because I'm pretty sure we were in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park area, or we were on public land somewhere.
Yeah.
And then we canoed out. And I just remember being like, wow, that was like the most fun I've had. Maybe it was a component of getting to swim, eat good. And then also you get to sit down when you're canoeing. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not quite like backpacking. Yeah, so I did that, went to that summer camp several years in a row. And then, high school starts and you kind of get focused on, working your first jobs, school, and the sport that you're probably focused on quite a bit at this point, or at least that's how it was for me. And so for me, it was soccer. I was doing high school soccer and then club soccer, but I was just getting burnt out on it. I was like, man, I don't even know if I enjoy this soccer stuff that much anymore. And so my parents are like, all right, well, if you drop that activity, you're going to have a hole in your schedule. So time to get a job. And they're like, it'd be really cool to be a soccer referee. I mean, you already know all the rules and all that stuff. And the pay was pretty darn good for a 14-year-old in
Yeah.
high school. And basically anything that requires a certification, is going to pay a little bit better. And my
Yeah.
brother at the time was working at Sun and Ski Sports and Outdoors, which is kind of like a sporting goods store here in Houston up at the mall. And they're like, you can either do what he's doing at a mall, which doesn't look as fun as soccer reffing, or you can be a soccer ref. So I was like, okay, soccer ref sounds good, and did all that. And then went off to college and, did the classic social life. Didn't really do a ton of what I would call outdoors in college, you know, skiing, trips to ranches, river trips to float and whatnot out in the hill country, but by no means would I call it like pursuing the outdoors.
Yeah.
And after college, moved back to Houston. So once again in the big city, and kind of still focusing on work and social life. That was certainly the dominating thing at that time. And I would say it was probably like midway through my 20s is when I started getting into kind of like endurance events, is what I guess you would call them. So half marathons, marathons, triathlons, stuff like that. And I was like, okay, I've got this bucket list of things I want to do. And then after that, I'm done. Because I didn't overly enjoy the training part, but I was like, it'd be kind of cool to knock these things off your bucket list.
Yeah.
And that is where the pursuing the outdoors kind of begins. So I did an Ironman, which was just nuts. one and done, did it. And I was like, okay, I'm selling my bike. I'm getting rid of my running shoes. I'm never going on a run again. I'm so tired of this. And so essentially did that. Yeah, I sold the bike. And my brother at the time was living in Austin, and he had purchased a Sun Dolphin Aruba 8 SS. So basically an 8-foot Walmart sit-in kayak.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, I saw how much fun he was having out in the hill country, tearing up like Barton Creek runs through town and just some other stuff. And so that kind of got me thinking like, man, I used to really enjoy canoeing at summer camp. Like, I wonder if it would be fun to replicate what we did at summer camp here in Texas. Because in my mind, I kind of always assumed that like North Carolina, and this is just, growing up being a kid, you don't
Yeah.
really know. You don't really know your environment as well as, say, an adult who's had experiences and whatnot. But, in Texas, everybody owns ranches if you want to pursue the outdoors.
Yeah.
And so I kind of and Kentucky's largely the same way. And so I just kind of always assumed that if you wanted to go do outdoors things, like you needed to own land, just because public land wasn't overly a thing around here in Texas. I think like 95% of our land is private.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, largely same thing in Kentucky. But yeah, I was thinking about my time in summer camp. I was like, dude, it'd be so fun to pack up our bags and go kayak camping here in Texas. Like, where would we even do that? I couldn't even begin to guess. And yeah, one thing led to another. I convinced two buddies to go with me on the inaugural trip to the Medina River,
Mm-hmm.
west of San Antonio and Bandera. And it was springtime. I think it was like May. So I'd done the Ironman in April. And then in May, June, it still had decent spring flows, or what I thought at the time. I didn't really know what a flow rate was. But we were ready to embark on this adventure. And it was going to be a one night deal where we just did a short section of river. And I was like, man, what could go wrong, right? Like 8 miles. I'm just finished being able to run double that, triple that, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, worst case scenario, you just hike and drag your kayak behind you. Like, how bad can 8 to 12 miles really be? Well, it can be pretty bad for those wondering. So essentially what we did is we overpacked. I mapped out the mileage on Google Earth, and my other two buddies had never gone kayak camping. In fact, I think very limited camping experience at all.
I see.
So not many summer camps, not many. I mean, they did Boy Scouts, but we all had extraordinarily limited kayak camping experience is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
And so we made like every mistake in the book, packed too much, planned for too much mileage. There wasn't enough water in the river. And it was a beautiful day, and the Medina River is stunning, if you guys have watched that video. But it was one of those things where it was type 2 fun, where you're having fun, but you're earning it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so we set off day one. We covered the mileage that we wanted to, but it was kind of one of those where we arrived at camp super late and we were so exhausted and cut up and just kind of like ready to sit in a camp chair and be uncomfortable. And that was just the beginning of the suck, because that night, none of us slept. It was way colder in the riverbed than we could have imagined. And we didn't really account for like the dew soaking or saturating everything. And we were in hammocks without underquilts. And so we were just freezing our tails off in these hammocks with like, I didn't even take a sleeping bag. I just took a sleeping bag liner because I was like, oh, it's going to be 70 degrees at night. Like, I love sleeping at 70 degrees in my bed. So that'd be perfect. I don't need a sleeping bag. And so, like 4 a.m., we were all kind of just like, hey, like, is anybody sleeping? Should we just start the fire again? And so we did that. And at the end of the trip, we were exhausted, hadn't slept, and loading our gear into the car. And I remember thinking like, dang, that was like a really tough time. But for some reason, I enjoyed it. Like, I want to do that again. I think I want to do that again. Whereas my other buddy, Alex, was like, yeah, I don't think I ever want to do that again. That's like one of the things I least want to do going forward. I was like, oh, that's fair. That's totally fair. And so then some time passed, and, we got another group together to go to the Frio, and that one went better. It was still tough. There still wasn't enough water, and we still packed too much stuff. But we had a bigger trip, and everybody enjoyed it. It was 2 nights camping, 3 days paddling. And those 2 trips were kind of like the beginning of the whole kayak camping thing. And so as you go and you do trips, you kind of refine what you bring. And I'm still doing that to this day. And eventually that kind of led us to Lake Washita, which was, I'm pretty sure, one of the first homegrown out of state trips that I had done, because I'd done something with a guy named Pete Beck with the River Kings out in North Carolina. We did a pack rafting trip, but I'm pretty sure that Lake Washita deal was the first one I had planned myself and done out of state.
I
And what
see.
we were up in Little Rock with Dome Life was doing their Fall into Nature event. So it was like
Mhm.
fall in Little Rock, it was beautiful weather. And so I was like, oh, we could parlay this into a little kayak camping trip in Lake Washita. It looks beautiful. So let's go see what the put in locations are and we'll just go camp on an island. It'll be epic. And as you well know, it is epic out there.
Yeah, it is
It was
absolutely
beautiful.
gorgeous.
But yeah, man, that's like the super long winded version of how I got into kayak camping. And there's so much in between those first two trips and now that I'm sure we'll get into and whatnot. But yeah, it was pretty fun, man. It's one of the best ways to experience the outdoors here in Texas, I think,
Hmm.
because kayaking and especially kayak camping, rivers are public land for the most part here in Texas. If
Yeah.
you're making a generalization, if it's a big river and you can navigate it, it's public land,
Yeah.
which not all states are like that. So it's really cool that Texas, which is a very much a landowner rights type of place, they are so supportive of riverbed is meant for the public ingress and egress. And that
Yeah.
kind of dates back to when the settlement of Texas, like using rivers to go around was very important, even when they're dry. That's the crazy thing is even when they dry up, they're still considered navigable, which is pretty rad. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's one of the main reasons. And then the second reason is basically that um, once you involve a kayak, most people are not down.
Yeah.
So it's easy to drive your car to a place. It's easy to just go for a walk, 5 mile walk or whatever. That's not easy, but you can do it. Most
Right.
people can. Whereas with kayaking, the moment you drop a kayak into the water and start paddling downstream, like 99% of people are out. That's too many logistics to plan. Where do you put in? How far do you paddle? Where do you take out? How do you get from the bottom back up to the top? Like there's just enough to where you will almost always have the whole place to yourself, which is epic in a state like Texas with 30 million people. It's like, dang. So those are kind of like the main reasons. I apologize for rambling, but hopefully that was a good look into how we've come to be.
That's awesome. So you started off that way. When did filming come into it? Because I noticed that you have, I mean, GoPro videos of skiing and swimming in the summertime back in the day. And at one point did that transform from the GoPro, us doing activities, to you filming, with drones and high quality cameras and doing voiceovers? What was the transition from GoPro to that?
Oh man, you just invoked another long story. um, so kind of to start on that, the short answer to your pointed question is, when did I start filming these trips? And that was the very first one, the Medina. And so I brought a GoPro Hero 4 on that trip and filmed that one. And
Mm,
so that one's up on my channel. It's one of the first, I think it's titled like, the trip that started it all.
mhm.
But it's kind of fun to go back and watch it because it is, definitely way less quality from a storytelling perspective and kind of just overall showing the trip. But it's still, very memorable. And, but I want to kind of throw it back to when I got into filming stuff. And honestly, this goes like way back to being a kid. Remember we had a filming project for school, and this was elementary school. And you had the option of presenting in front of class or filming something with your group and then playing it in front of the class. And right off the bat, I was like, man, who likes presenting in front of class? Like filming sounds way better.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did. I mean, I don't even remember what that was for, but we just had a blast, hitting record and stopping. It was a VHS type of recording device. So you hit record, you do your thing, you stop, and then the next scene, you hit record, you stop. It's all one takes.
Yeah.
So I remember really enjoying that. But when I actually started to film and edit videos, they're all kind of home video style. If you guys have ever seen a documentary about someone who eventually became like a filmmaker or something like that, there's always some potato quality. They stole their mom's point and shoot camera and they were filming stupid trampoline stunts in the backyard because they thought it was cool and they wanted to be like the TV shows they were watching.
Right.
And so that was very much me. Like if we were doing something fun or entertaining or cool, I was bringing a camera along and then I'll plug that footage into my editing software. And that was back when I really enjoyed putting effects and stuff on it. And so it started really long time ago. And then on the Remote Designs website, here, I'm going to pull that up real quick because it does a good job of diving into the history. And I'll read just the beginning of it on the About Us section. But yeah, so on March 2008, so way back in 2008, I began uploading potato quality home videos to a new website called YouTube. This developed over the years, and in 2017, I discovered a passion for making outdoor edits with an emphasis on kayak camping. So that's kind of like the dates of when I started. But those first videos were kind of like GoPro for a ski trip, and I'll make a ski trip edit just to show the buddies. And YouTube is the best place to host that. And so you film it, you upload it, you spend way too much time editing it, then you upload it and send it to the buddies. And what's funny is that those videos are public and anybody can watch them and largely make fun of how bad you are at skiing or something like that. And so in 2017, I had a GoPro. And because I just always loved filming stuff and editing and having fun with it, I said, well, this thing's for sure coming with us. And I had seen some other kayak camping stuff on YouTube. There wasn't a ton of it at the time, but certainly I would say in 2017, Trip Smith was probably the most prevalent kayak camper. Have you heard of him by chance, Russell?
I have not actually.
Okay. He was, I would say, so he has a pretty big outdoors channel. He mostly does sailing and he uses his motorboat to go around now, but he was kind of an inspiration to be like, oh, like you can film kayak camping trips. And so I was like, cool, this is a trip that is worthy of bringing an action camera, because I think back then the stigma was, well, I don't do anything cool enough to have a GoPro or do action camera type stuff. I think most people face that because you watch the GoPro launch video and it's a bunch of people doing backflips on dirt bikes, paragliding, surfing, and doing all this crazy stuff. And it's a bunch of professionals too. So they look cool doing it. And one thing led to another. Filmed that trip, that Medina trip in 2017, uploaded it, and didn't overly think much about it. It was kind of hit upload. All right, wait several months before we do our next trip, upload again. But one thing that kind of took me by surprise was that people started watching it, which is hilarious. I was like, man, why would people watch this? It's just me and my two buddies struggling our way through a river. And eventually it started to, pick up enough steam to where you get a subscriber here, maybe 2 subscribers a week or something like that. And that is enough fuel in the fire to get you be like, okay, well, now I'm going to intentionally start making videos. And, the people have shown that they want to watch kayak camping, and it just happens to be the crossroads of what I enjoy making and what people are willing to watch, which is exactly where you want to be if you're going to be doing YouTube stuff. So I was like, cool, this is the dream. Like I get to make kayak camping videos and people will watch them. And so, yeah, I think that video has 40,000 views now, which is crazy.
Oh, wow.
It has more views than some videos that I would say are in a cooler place and better edited. But I guess there's something about that one that resonates with people. That's a crazy thing. It's the story that a lot of people resonate with, and maybe not so much the visuals, although that certainly helps.
Yeah.
But after a couple of videos, I went from a one GoPro setup to a one GoPro setup, and I bought a Sony A7 III. And that was, I'm pretty sure, my Frio River video. That was one of the first ones that I took that A7 III on, which was cool. And so if you guys are wondering what A7 III is, it's a mirrorless camera that if you've ever seen someone with what looks like cinema camera quality footage, like that's what this camera gets close to. I'm not going to call it a cinema camera because it's not, but it's really good quality footage. And it was kind of what I would say it was the most popular prosumer camera at the time that was going around YouTube. Like all the photo and video photography YouTubers were reviewing this camera and saying, this is kind of the one you should use. It's the best bang for your buck. And as soon as I bought it, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, this definitely is. Yeah. And then maybe a year or so after that, it was like, okay, it's time to do a drone. You see people making these videos and seeing the perspectives they can get with these different tools. And you think, well, what am I missing out by not having that? And one of the biggest pieces is like, if I do bring that on the trip, do I enjoy tossing tossing a drone in the air, taking the time and committing myself to uh, maybe do less miles, but get some tasty drone footage.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed flying the drone, capturing the footage, because if you're really into filming, you almost enjoy capturing the shot as much as you do doing the kayaking.
Yeah.
Right? You go to this beautiful place, and you want to show everybody it in the best possible way. And one of the best ways to do that is GoPros, DSLR, and drone. But certainly there was a time where I would bring too much stuff, like extra lenses and extra GoPros and all this stuff. And you kind of start to get to a point where it complicates things.
Yeah.
And so kind of pulling it back a little bit and realizing, okay, what are the core things I need to make an awesome video? And that's the front Kayak GoPro, so the one that's facing back, the chesty GoPro, and then a DSLR, which honestly, I use it the least. Like if there's one camera I would leave at home, it's the DSLR, and then a drone. And that's kind of like my core setup for filming these trips. I do bring the DSLR every time just because it's not that big of a weight sacrifice, I guess. And I do enjoy it for campsite footage.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, if I could only take one camera, it'd be a GoPro, hands down, like without question. There's just something about the footage that those things can capture, like in the moment.
Exactly.
Like some of my favorite footage from the Devil's River video from last year is chesty or the POV facing backwards. And it's just, you're going down this crazy rapid. It's capturing your facial expressions. You're hooting and hollering. It can record audio because it's waterproof. And then you get to the bottom of the rapid, you turn around and your GoPro's still recording. Your buddy's just upside down, getting absolutely shredded by the rocks. And you're capturing his reaction. Like there's just no world that you could capture that with a drone or a mirrorless camera. And so that's why GoPros are elite. Like by far the best.
That angle that you use where you have the GoPro at the front of your kayak, especially when you're going down those rapids, is insane. The water comes over, and of course, since it's just a thin layer of water, it's always crystal clear. It's just, the shot is amazing. I actually ended up borrowing that idea when I went to the coast last time, and I
saw
took my
that
kayak, and I was just like, I'm gonna try to see if I can go out doing that, and it just happened to be pretty choppy that day, and I got a few of those. I was like, man, that just looks so cool.
Yes, it does, man. And I think a lot of people don't get that view because they put their GoPros on a pole.
Mm-hmm.
And they try to extend it above. And there's kind of like a rule in filmmaking where you want to film at the eye level of your subject. So if you're trying to get really cool river footage, like as far as water coming over the bow, get as close to that river level as possible. And I know you probably did that too. You just clamp it to the front of your kayak. It couldn't be easier to set up. You just clamp it to the front of your kayak, turn it on, and you're going to get it, film in slow motion, and you're good.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, the first time that happened, I remember I was like, that's so epic looking. I've got to get two GoPros, and I got to have one on the front and one on the chest at all times now.
Yeah.
And so it's always funny because right before rapid, I'll be scrambling on my kayak, like trying to turn on the front one, and then making sure my chest is recording as well.
Right.
And then you're locked in. I mean, that's the great thing about GoPros; they kind of capture everything.
Exactly. And they're low maintenance. You just set it and forget it, for the most part. And I kind of cheat when I first started filming fishing videos, which I haven't put very many of them out because I swear editing is the bane of my existence. And so when I first started filming fishing videos, I actually have a pole that I would put kind of 45 degrees out the back of my kayak. And I would get some decent footage, but I would get tired of it dying or running out of storage and stuff like that. So I went and bought some 256 gig SD cards, and I got a replacement door for my GoPro Hero 9. And then I got a USB-C cable, goes down to a power bank, and I can run that thing recording like 8 hours straight. And the only thing is it's not waterproof. So I made a mistake, took a dump, and that was the end of that one. So it's luckily the GoPro still works, but it shorted out 2 of the 4 battery prongs on the inside. So the battery doesn't last nearly as long as it should, and it has some issues sometimes. But for the most part, it still runs.
Oh gosh, so basically you have to have it plugged into an external battery. Is
Uh,
that
that's
kind of
how it
the?
was at first, but no, it still works with a regular battery. It just doesn't last as
Oh
long.
sweet.
So yeah, so I mean,
Okay.
I got lucky with that, but yeah, it still rocks and rolls, and that's the one I still use for everything now. I'm looking at getting another one, but speaking of Sony, so I use a Nikon D750, which is a great photography camera, but the video on it is extremely subpar. I mean, there's no autofocus or anything like that. So it makes it very rough to get any type of B-roll shot, or especially when it comes to fishing, a release.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just not going to be in focus. So I was actually looking at getting the Sony A7 IV mainly for
Mm-hmm.
the video autofocus function. And just because I've heard a lot of people say great things about it.
I'm looking into one right now.
Really?
So yeah, feel free to ask any questions, but I think it would work really well for you because it can also be used as a webcam. And it
Mhm.
looks like you have a nice camera as is.
Yeah, I'm
Not
using my
sure what you have.
D750 for this.
Yeah, so this one, it couldn't be easier. You literally plug in the cable that comes with it, and then it's USB. And so you just plug that into your computer and it's set up as a webcam.
Oh, you don't even need the
It's
cam link?
no, I don't even know what that is. It's literally just USB-C to USB, and then I have a little USB-C converter.
Really?
But
Yeah,
it's
I use
super nice.
something, it's actually by Elgato, like your microphone is,
Okay.
but it's called a Camlink 4K, and so it's a little dongle that plugs into the USB port of my laptop or my computer, and then I have a USB cable going to my camera, so or a HDMI cable.
What's shocking is that the A7S III, which is known to be kind of, I mean, it's a nicer camera, it costs more money, it's video focused. That doesn't have the same webcam feature as the
Really?
A7 IV. Yeah, which is weird. And so I bought the A7 IV because I wasn't totally sold on the A7S III yet. I love shooting in slow motion,
Mhm.
and the A7S III doesn't record audio in slow motion for 240 frames a
Really?
second, which is like when you guys see the water coming over the bow. It's like, okay, I'll go ahead and get the A7 IV, but I will say the only downside I would say about the A7 IV is that the LCD screen that is on it is not great.
Yeah.
It's not super bright. Now you get used to it, but it was enough to where I was like, okay, screw it, I'm gonna buy an A7S III too.
Really?
Yeah, and I was like, I kind of need a two camera setup anyway. I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I'll just go ahead and pull the trigger on the A7S III. But at the end of the day, like mirrorless cameras complicate a lot of things because you have to set your exposure. And if you're shooting manual mode, then it's like you pull it out of your backpack and you're like, okay, does it look good? And by that time, you've potentially already missed the shot,
Yeah.
whatever it is. And so that's why I love GoPros because, like you said, you set and forget, and it's great. Like
Exactly.
there's something to be said about the simplicity of a GoPro. You hit one button, and then to turn it off, you hit it again, and you're
Yeah.
good. And so
Exactly.
I would get the new GoPro before the A7S or the A7 IV, just
See,
because I think you'll find more utility out of it.
see, that's one thing that because I have a GoPro Hero 4 Black, excuse me, and a GoPro Hero 9. So I have the two GoPro set up, although with the GoPro 4, the audio is crap because you have to put it in the waterproof. It's not good. But that's something where I could possibly put it on the front of the kayak, or I don't really need audio from the front of the kayak, where the 9 is a chesty. Use it as, the vlog style. But the main
Mm-hmm.
reason that I want to get a Sony A7 IV is the autofocus. I'm trying to do a lot more product videography and stuff like that, and b-roll is just so difficult without autofocus, and I'm doing panning shots or anything like that.
Oh yeah.
So I'm really looking at that. And actually, when I commented that I didn't know you knew Cole and Justice, he's actually the one that told me about the Sony A7 IV. And
Oh cool.
yeah, so I was asking him what his setup was, and he's like, "Oh, the Sony A7 IV," and I
Mm-hmm.
don't remember what video it was, but he had just this crisp fish release in slow mo, and I was like, like, what are you even using for that? And I think he said he was using a 70 to 200 on the Sony A7 IV, and I said, yeah, that's definitely what I'm going to get, and probably going to get a 16 to 35 also, just kind of
Yeah.
cover everything that I need. So I think that's
If I
what
were
I'm
you,
going
I
to
would
do.
just get a 24 to 70 and keep it one lens
Really?
because yeah, yeah. That's what I use.
I see.
It's just a straight up 24 to 70.
Okay.
And you could even get away with doing the 24 to 105.
Hmm.
But if you're just doing run and gun filmmaking, one lens is great
Hmm.
because you don't have to swap it out and you don't have to think about it. It's like the only thing you're thinking about is composition and getting the shot because you don't have any other option.
I
Whereas if you
see.
bring two lenses, you're always thinking, oh, should I have the 1635 on me or should I have the 7200? Because
Yeah.
here's the other thing. A GoPro is your wide angle, so you don't need a 1635. And
Yeah.
7200, there's a huge void of most of the focal lengths people film with
Hmm.
is between that 16 and 70.
I see.
And so, yeah, because 70 to 200 is super tight. It's
Yeah.
very zoomed in,
And I
but it
would
looks
want to
great.
use that for like wildlife stuff. So if I'm going down the river, I
Yeah.
like to, if I see, birds or some type of deer, turtles, anything like that on the bank, I try to get, good footage of those. So that's why I was thinking the 70 to 200. But
So in that
I did,
case, I would go 100 to 400 because if you have a 24 to 70, you have quite a bit covered there, but then a
mhm,
100 to 400, you get an extra 200 millimeters of reach.
yeah. Hmm.
It's like, so that's what I use. I
Yeah.
only advocate it for it because I'm biased.
That's
But
definitely getting more reach on that is definitely a beneficial thing for what I do though. So yeah, that's
yeah,
definitely something that I might look into. And then I was thinking of 16 to 35 for astrophotography, but a 24 to 70 would do just as fine with that. So
yeah, yeah, exactly. Your 24 is fine with it. And realistically with astrophotography, if you did a 16 to 35, you're probably doing an f4 lens because the 2.8 lenses are
ridiculous.
super expensive.
Yep.
Trying to see how I can, yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, go back to like talking about filming fishing, man.
It's
I'm
tough,
wearing a
man.
Wildfly shirt because I love his videos.
Yeah.
He's one of those North Star channels that I look to and be like, all right, what is he doing? Like he's clearly doing something super right. And one of the things he just super excels at is telling the story.
Yeah.
But I have started to film quite a bit of fishing. I say film, but quite a bit of fishing recently because I've gotten into fly fishing because of Wildfly.
Uh-huh.
And man, it is brutal
It
trying
is
to
tough.
film it because you never know when you're going to hook up.
Yep.
And so it's one of those things where you just have to be filming all the time and you absolutely burn through batteries and you burn through cards. And at the end of the day, if you have a bunch of great footage, you have to offload it. And I know he brings laptops and external hard drives on all his trips and everything, so he can't offload that footage. And
Yeah.
it was at that point where I felt extremely fortunate that I filmed kayak camping because with kayak camping, there's no like when you need to film because it looks beautiful, like you're passing by a cliff or a bluff, or there's a rapid coming up,
Hmm.
or your buddy's doing something stupid,
Yeah.
or you're cooking food or setting up camp. And so it's like every one of those, you just hit record real quick, capture the moment, and then a minute later you're done. Like max 1 minute later you're done. Because most of our rapids aren't that long, but with
Right.
fishing, you're filming for 20 minutes just to capture literally nothing.
Yeah.
And so I was like, man, I am so glad that people watch my videos with no intention, like with no expectation of me fishing. Because if I had to film kayak camping and fishing, oh my gosh, I feel so much for the anglers that do film like that. And that's because I always wonder, I was like, man, why do all these anglers have such serious GoPro setups and rigs and whatnot with external batteries and like looking at John B and his fishing and whatnot.
Yeah.
You look at his chest and he has cables running everywhere, so he can have his mic, which is cool. That's good.
Yeah.
And then his external batteries, and then he's probably swapping SD cards all the time. I was just like, I feel so thankful that I film what I film because
Yeah.
filming kayak camping is literally just my favorite thing to film. If I that and day trips, and I'm just so thankful that I've found a community that resonates with that and is
Yeah.
willing to show up and watch them because it is certainly one of the smallest niches out there.
Yes, that it is. There's not very much of it out there at all. And I'm glad that I came across your channel, but when I was looking, I was kind of disappointed at, the lack of content out there for it. But then I come across yours and your videos gave me pretty much any information that I needed, but it was just there wasn't very many of them. And it's a short
Mhm.
list of things that kind of match the keywords, and then it just starts going to other things that are slightly related or not even related at all. And it's like, well, I guess there isn't a big niche for that. So
Yeah, there isn't.
yeah.
There really isn't. What's been really cool because of that, because it's a small niche. Like plenty of people will go kayaking or whatever.
Mhm.
They're at the state park and you can rent a kayak. I mean, just look at Austin, Texas. It's thousands of people are paddleboarding and kayaking on any given Saturday during the summer out there,
Yep.
but zero of them are thinking about kayak camping or going to a remote place to do that activity. And so one of the cool things I notice is that whenever my video, if I upload a video and it gets a lot of distribution, so it gets a lot of views, I'll notice that it's reaching people that aren't kayak campers per se.
Mm-hmm.
And so seeing the interactions of people commenting or just shooting me a message to discuss it, they're just like, hey, I've only ever overlanded. I've only ever car camped. And, that's a really rad way to do things. But seeing that kayak camping is a thing, like I'm going to start bringing kayaks on our overlanding trips or just vice versa. Like I didn't even know you could do this. I didn't know
Yeah.
kayak camping was a thing. So it's been really fun to see over the years how many people we've brought to the sport.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, and I know there's a constant discussion about spot burning or like, are people that are uploading content to the internet actually doing good? And I feel very confident that absolutely you are, because at the end of the day, the rivers aren't that much more full, if at
Mm-hmm.
all. And the more people that know about our precious resources, the more they're going to take care of it.
Exactly.
And it sounds like Jose does some sort of wildlife. It sounds like he's in the field sometimes and he does some sort of wildlife PhD is what he's pursuing.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I'm sure he can attest that like the more people that know about these rad rivers and creeks, the more they're gonna be like, oh, maybe I won't pour that gallon of gasoline on the ground, out at the ranch.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's one of those things to where if they're getting out there and they're enjoying an activity, then they're going to be more likely to share it with their friends for one, and for two, to take care of it. And so that's one thing
1,000%.
that, yeah, that's one thing that we kind of strive to do is not only tell people, hey, of course, you need to take care of these resources, but do it in an entertaining way. Get people out there doing what we enjoy doing and doing things that they probably didn't even know that they could do, and then that just turns into, oh, maybe we should care for this. We don't like going to our camping spot and finding other people's trash there, or we don't like going
For
and
sure.
possibly catching a fish and then end up hooking a chip bag in the water. And it's just an evolution of information getting out to these people and hopefully spreading, like, just pick up after yourself and clean up other people's stuff if you're out there. And that's something that I'm real big on. If I go somewhere and I see trash, I'm picking it up. I don't care whose it is.
For sure. Yeah. And I think anglers do that really well. They're certainly extraordinarily focused on restoration of rivers and making sure that they're taken care of. And I honestly, I developed an even deeper passion for conserving our rivers after I started fishing more, because you start to realize there are beautiful things that are living in there and they have these thriving ecosystems. And, because kayaking, it's very much what is at the surface and, looking down at the clear water and seeing rocks and stuff. But really what's at the surface and what's above the surface, like bluffs or beautiful trees or something like that. But when you start to angle, start to fish, you're like, oh my gosh, well, there's a whole lot more that's going on than cliffs or trees. Like they're thriving ecosystems that are right beneath your kayak, oftentimes a couple inches away. And I don't know if you've seen the latest video I uploaded, but that was definitely one of the premier points and storylines I was trying to get across. We did this beautiful Ozark stream up in Oklahoma, which a lot of people don't realize that Oklahoma has Ozarks as well.
Yep.
And has some of the clearest water in the Ozarks too, which is crazy. It must be an artesian zone for the Ozarks on the western slope or something like that. But it's just tons of springs and you can see crystal clear 10 feet to the bottom. And so what I started to notice is there were fish everywhere. It's like, oh, that's so cool. And so I started to film underwater. And of course, you can only see so much when you have a GoPro screen, you're filming underwater. And then I launched the drone up. And when I was going back through and editing, I knew I had captured some just absolutely insane fish activity. But what I didn't realize is that I had filmed like thousands of fish going back through the footage, only from a couple of minutes of filming.
Yeah.
And so you saw largemouth bass coexisting with smallmouth bass, coexisting with sucker fish and longnose gar. And I'm sure panfish and other stuff that I just didn't see. And I was like, this is brilliant, because you never think that that kind of stuff happens. And it's just like crazy, because I had this drone time lapse going. And you saw the activity where you'd have a pod of bass go approach the suckers and then kind of like get expulged and go back. And then they would go check out what the gar were doing. And the gar were doing like this crazy, almost looks like spawning thing. It was in November, so I don't really know what it was. I was like, man, this is crazy. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's doing so well, because it's a beautiful creek, but below the surface is even more beautiful, you could
Yeah.
argue.
And the
And
water was
so
so blue, clear, almost like, I mean, it wasn't typically you go underwater and you're going to have murkiness. And in the footage that you captured, there was zero murkiness. It was
it's
so
crazy.
clear.
If there's anybody that's watching this, I'm sure none of y'all have heard of me before. Please go watch that video. It is called Kayaking the Ozarks, 8 miles in a wild aquarium, because that's exactly what it was. And I know you probably have a lot of fishermen that watch this.
Yeah.
They've probably all dropped off by now because all we've done is talk about kayak camping. But
I hope not.
definitely go watch that video. Shameless plug. Go watch that video because I think you'll be really impressed and astonished. And one of the realizations I had during that video, and I voiced it pretty well when I was doing the voiceover and kind of just talking to the camera, um, was how appreciative I am of kind of like Oklahoma and the Ozarks, just in general, because in Texas we have so many people that are resources, especially the places you want to be in the hill country. Beautiful rivers, but man, it's just like there's so many people now that I don't know if it's the aquifer getting pumped down too hard, or we're just in a drought, or if weather patterns have changed. I don't know what's happening, but man, there's like no water in those rivers anymore, and it's been like that for years. I mean,
Yeah.
we're going on 5 years. Most of those hill country streams have not been worth the salt to go kayak camp.
Yeah.
And like I've noticed a decrease in the flow rates since 2017. Like if I'm looking back on it for the last 7 years, it's like they've slowly but surely used to always have flow during spring, and right now they're still bone dry, which is
That's
crazy.
crazy.
But you go up to Oklahoma, and there's so much less population. So I think Texas has 30 million people, probably more, but Oklahoma is what, 5 million, maybe 5 or 6, and you go to these places and there's just nobody out there.
Yeah.
And it, probably gets a little bit more precipitation, but the creeks and rivers just flow so much stronger. Like they actually flow with force. Whereas out in the hill country, aside from a few different rivers, like the Devils is pretty good, but
Yeah.
you're kind of bumping and grinding your way down it unless there's been some extreme recent rain. And so it was one of those things where it's like, man, I bet this is what the hill country used to be like, which is kind of sad. But we've all seen, the Rio Grande is effectively dry right now in Big Bend. It's flowing at 6 cubic feet per second, which is nothing. That's literally zero. Yeah. And, you look at the Devil's River, it's at 48 cubic feet per second at the Pafford crossing. If you've watched my Devil's River video, we did that at 180, which was considered low flow at the time.
Yeah.
And the Guadalupe is super low. It's just like, man, when is it going to stop? Because, it'll get rain, but it doesn't keep flow out there. And then of course you see the population increase. So you're like, I'm not a scientist, so I can't come to conclusions. I'm just seeing, with my own eyes. But yeah, man, you go out to the Ozarks and the Ouachita, and you're like, I feel like this is what it used to be like out there. And the other thing, last thing, I know I'm ranting, but last thing I'll say on it is if you read the Texas Spring Almanac from like the late 1800s or early 1900s, they basically describe all known springs in the state of Texas and the history of them going back to when the first settlers were coming in the area. And they talk about these springs that were literally fountains.
Really?
There's Native American artwork to kind of like prove that they used to be giant fountains boiling out of the water. There was so much pressure on the aquifer because it would rain. You'd be in an arid environment, but there was so much water making its way down in elevation to the aquifer that these artesian springs would literally be fountains of spring water all around the hill country. And you're like, dang. And they noticed as soon as water wells started getting drilled, like those artesian springs started to decrease. And we of course know what it's like out there now, and I won't get too much into that because I don't have any studies and I haven't looked at any of the scientific data, but it's just, I don't know, man. I'm just looking at it with my own eyes. Like, dude, it just doesn't flow like it used to be. There's a angler in the hill country, Manny B, Skinny Water Boys. And like, he's just known as someone who constantly crushes the Texas hill country rivers, hence the Skinny Water Boys, right? He's always out there in a kayak, conventional fishing. And even he has been pushed out into the lakes because there's just not enough water for the most part in where he lives to properly hit those creeks. And so he's been doing a lot of lake fishing. I think he's actually really enjoyed it because you can find some absolute hogs in the lake. But yeah, I was texting with him. I was like, man, what do you think? Am I crazy? But
it's crazy. I mean, I remember when I was younger, we used to go to Jacob's Well out there in Wimberley, and now it's not even flowing anymore.
It's dry.
Last I heard, it's there. You can see the water, but it's not even flowing out of the Jacob's well anymore. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's so sad, because there used to be hundreds of people waiting to just jump off the rock. And then of course
Hmm.
there's the people that would go pretty much cave diving under with scuba gear and stuff. And now there's none of that.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, like Jacob's Well never used to run dry, and people say Jacob's Well and other features like that, they're kind of like the heartbeat of the aquifer. It kind of lets you know like how is it doing,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, there's a film project that I want to do. It's kind of like passion project based.
Hmm.
It's not it's not kayak camping, and so it's one of those things where I really want to put time into essentially free diving a lot of different places in Texas to kind of show what I did in that most recent Oklahoma video, which is the subsurface.
Hmm.
So I want to, kind of show people what does inside Jacob's Well look like, what going down into it, and then
That would be
Canyon
awesome.
Lake, the San Marcos River, Frio River, all these different beautiful water resources that we have. It's like show them what we have, and then
Yeah.
potentially do some research and see like is there a correlation between the amount of people that have moved here and in the flow rates. And I think it's not all doom and gloom because my brother lives in Austin. He's lived there for a while, and what he did is he used natural landscaping and arid landscaping in his yard in Austin.
Hmm.
Stuff that allows rain to pass through it and go into the aquifer. And granted, he's in a small house on a small lot, but at least he's doing something. It's like
Yeah.
if you move to an arid region like the hill country, maybe you should consider um, using native grasses and
Hmm.
stuff that doesn't require a ton of watering for whenever we haven't gotten rain in a long time. It's kind of like, oh, that's fine. The yard will be cool. Because I
Right.
know they had a bunch of bands this summer, and you know, St. Augustine grass is not great for the hill country during
No,
drought
no.
times. It's
And a
thirsty
lot of people
stuff.
have it.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize for ranting.
Oh, you're not ranting at all. I definitely have the same passions that you do in terms of trying to conserve water, and keep
Yeah.
these waterways, for one, navigable, and two, have good ecosystems in the water. So
If you just see them for your own eyes, you really start to see how vastly different.
yeah.
And we're not talking about far away. And one of the first times my eyes were open was doing the Little Missouri River in Arkansas,
Hmm.
Washita's. And, you look down, that was the most vibrant fishing ecosystem I could have ever seen. There was just, had to have been tens of thousands of fish that I saw the entire trip. And that was
Yeah.
before I was into fishing, and I was still
Hmm.
mesmerized by how many there were. Um, and then, I thought that was like maybe an exception to the rule until I kayaked other Oklahoma Ozark creeks and other Washita creeks. And I was like, oh no, that's just how it is up here because it's undeveloped.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
it's just native habitat, and they're thriving. Like they're good, man. Like they're great out there. They don't really, for not everywhere, but there's a lot of places that are just doing great, which is
Yep.
cool to see. And then you got to the hill country, and you're just like, oh man, like I see what it could be, but it's a little tough to see just how dry everything's getting. And it's it's not. I mean, it's irreversible, so that's cool. But I don't think it'll ever happen. If I'm going to be completely honest, it'd have to be a huge cultural shift, and I just don't think it'll happen. There's too many people. Like, dude, I was skiing in Steamboat this year, and I was in a hot tub, random hot tub in the middle of Steamboat. And
Hmm.
this dude is from Austin, and he was bragging about, because we were talking about water and flow rates and stuff. Funny how that works its way into my conversations. And he was like bragging about watering his lawn when he wasn't supposed to this summer in Austin. And I like got out of the hot tub and left. I was like, yeah, I was with my dad and brother. I was like, guys, I can't handle this. Like,
Yeah.
I'm out of here.
I'm not going to ruin my
They have similar
vacation having a
sentiments.
discussion about this.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's not, don't move to Austin. Austin's legit. It's so cool. San Antonio's awesome too. And that whole area is rad.
Yeah.
Like maybe consider the landscaping, because I think that would have a huge change.
Exactly. That's so.
But
My house before I sold it was there in San Marcos, and I used to live right close to the Blanco River there, halfway between Austin and San Antonio, and I loved it over there. But there were so many people in the subdivision that I lived in that would have sprinkler systems running every single day, and my yard always looked nice, and I just hand watered it, and I would water it 2, maybe 3 times a
oh
week,
yeah,
and it would be for like 10 minutes, and my grass was fine. But then you have people with sprinkler systems just pumping water,
chugging
every single
water.
day. So, and that's one thing is the Blanco River is always low. When I was a
Mm-hmm.
kid, I remember it would get seasonally dry, and now it's been dry for years, and
Really?
it's
That's
crazy to think.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it
That's really
normally if you go
interesting.
further up the Blanco, like towards Blanco, Texas, there's water, but if you get down to the 5 Mile Dam region there by Kyle San Marcos, I mean, it was always seasonally low, and then it started getting to
Yeah.
seasonally dry, and now it's just been dry. It's crazy.
See, that's what I'm saying, Russell. Like, I'm not trying to be out here like starting stuff, but like, I'm just watching with my own eyes what it used to look like and what it looks like now. And there's been just
Yeah.
an insane population boom. And you're like, I gotta think it's correlated. I don't know. I'm not
I
out
mean, it
here
has
trying
to
to do
be.
hot
You
takes,
can
but
see it all throughout the country. I mean, look at California and, everything that's going on with Lake Mead, and it's happening everywhere where large populations are. Water is, getting, pretty sparse. So
for
it's
sure.
one of those things. So
And we're supposed to be in an El Nino storm cycle too.
so I was to say we talked a little bit about fly fishing. So I've noticed you've been out hitting the white bass recently.
Yeah, man, it's been so fun. So I have to imagine a lot of your listeners know what the white bass run is, but I'll just do a super high level kind of go into detail about what this phenomenon is. But basically, every spring, white bass live in reservoirs. So think about lakes and whatnot. And in Texas, and for sure Oklahoma and Arkansas, and I'm sure many other places too. But the white bass are migratory such that they kind of return back to where they were born and spawned up in the feeder creek. So what they'll do is they'll travel by the masses every spring from the reservoirs up into the feeder creeks. And if you can time it right and you find a group of them, they kind of like move in waves and they're thousands at a time, probably hundreds of thousands at a time. But they move up into every single finger that feeds into the lake. And generally speaking, like the bigger stream, the more fish you'll have moving through it. But you can have the best day of fishing ever or the worst day of fishing ever. You'll
Yep.
catch 50 fish or you'll catch none. And you kind of just keep working and you keep finding them. Well, what's really cool about Houston is because we're so far south, we're one of the first locations that gets that. And so, you kind of have to be watching like, okay, it's been raining because they need water in order to push up through obstacles that they can't make it over without high water. And then you need longer daylight, which is another thing that signals them. And you need warmer temperatures. Doesn't have to be warm, but just warmer.
Mm-hmm.
So the combination of rain and water, sunlight, and then warmth is what starts to drive them. And a good indicator is if you guys know those trees that kind of bloom purple, like they don't have leaves yet, but they bloom purple, the first signs of spring, that's a good indication that the white bass are running.
Yep.
And so they start to shoot up. And one of the kind of like the low key creeks around Houston is, well, I guess it's not really that low key. It runs through the heart of the woodlands, but yeah, you can. There's a preserve that you can access it, and this is just one of the places I was hitting this year. But there's a preserve that you can hike in and access it, which is cool because it's more than 20 yards from a parking lot, so most people aren't willing to go fish it, and it's wade fishing. Yeah, so we went, and it's beautiful sandy bottom, and dude, I had no expectations. Me and my buddy were fishing and fishing, and we weren't finding them. Then we moved spots, and I was fishing this real juicy looking hole, and it was kind of like this waterfall looking thing. I was like, man, surely there's something in here. And also, it's kind of cool that there's a little waterfall in Houston, completely natural.
Right.
And then I heard my buddy yell out. He's like, "Hey, I think I found him." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll believe it if I see it." And he had called me like he was out of vision. I was like, all right, I'll go check and see. Cause I had caught a little spotted bass, which is kind of like a native bass to East Texas. I caught a little spotted bass. I was like, oh, sweet. Like right on. Like we're having a good day's fishing. I've caught something. Cause I'm still a newbie angler. And he was like, no, I swear, like I think I'm on the white bass. Like I think I got him. And he's like, it's a huge fish. And I was thinking, there's no way it's a white bass. It's not a huge fish. And so he took a selfie with it or whatever and put it back in its way. And as I was walking his way, he was about 50 yards away. He's like, he caught another one. I was like, oh, we might be on him, baby. And so I get to him and he's like, dude, I swear they're in here. And what he was fishing was a purple kind of small Clouser minnow, which the white bass love Clouser minnows.
Yep.
And I had a chartreuse on. So down here last year, I killed him on the chartreuse. And so I was like, surely it worked once. It should work again. And so I, wet a line. He's like, I think they're somewhere over here. And so you wet a line a little bit, wet a line. And it's like, oh, got one. And like, dude, when you get one, you're like, okay, we might be on it, boys.
Right.
And so I pulled one in. I was like, yes, it was a white bass. It was actually fighting pretty darn good. Like they're pretty chunky this year, good sized. foot long fish type of stuff, or less. And so I was like, sweet, that's epic. And so I caught it, and Alex, my buddy, was just like, high fiving, because that means you're about to have a great day of fishing. And of course, it was right as we should have been like stopping fishing, because he had to get home to his wife and his child to kind of take over duties and responsibilities. And so I was like, oh no, we got to fish hard. And so just started pulling them out. Every other cast, you'd be pulling them out. And what's funny is that it shut off for Alex, my buddy. And so he stopped catching them. He caught like, 3 or 4 good size, and it shut off for him. He's like, dude, what the heck? Here, move over. And so he started to fish the same hole that I was fishing, because like I said, you could be 10 yards apart and someone is pulling them out and the other person is not at all. And so what essentially happened is he moved over to the hole that I was fishing, and he was not catching them. And I was like, man, I know they're there because we were just pulling them out left and right. And eventually we did a fly change to a chartreuse. He started to have the same results as me, man. And so the purple chartreuse, or the purple minnow and the chartreuse minnow, was enough to be different enough to where they were absolutely hammering. It was one of those where you catch one, you pull it in, you've got one, you're showing your buddy, and your fly's just dangling in the water, and you got another one on. You're like, oh my gosh, this is brilliant.
That's the best kind of fishing.
Oh, it was amazing, man. And so, yeah, we just had an all-time day and returned back to that same spot the next week. And guess what?
Nothing or more.
They weren't there. They weren't there. And I was like, man, there's no way. And so I probably burned an hour. I was like, I know it's the juiciest looking spot too. I probably burned an hour. I'm going to pull it up and show a photo, because you guys would be like, yeah, you definitely should continue to fish that spot. But there was just amazing color change, and there was solid flow. All right, is it going to focus?
That's gorgeous.
Oh, it's focusing on my face. There you go. So that's my buddy. The river's flowing over that sandy shelf into a deep pocket, and it's
awesome.
Probably 10, 15 yards wide at that point. And so you're just like, oh, they've got to be here. There's just no way there aren't fish held up in here, even spawning. Right. And so I probably burned an hour. I caught one, which meant they're not there, right? Like there's always these random solo guys. And so I went about 50 yards upstream to where I was kind of like ready to call up, but I was like, I want to try to catch that spotted bass I caught last week by the waterfall. And I didn't catch it. And I was kind of just like, well, this is a pretty area. So I kind of just have my fly dangling in the water. And I know people always say you catch fish when you're not trying to, because it just looks like a dead minnow in the current or whatever. And I caught a white bass right there. I was like, dude, no way. This is sick. In this waterfall boil. I got to show it to you. I know this is not the best TV, but it's such a beautiful looking place for Houston. Let's see if I got it. But yeah, so I didn't have much success in that little hole, and I turned around and slung it into like some different current. I was like, man, I feel like that looks fishy too. There was some brush that was kind of down in the trees. I was bass fishing, not white bass. And I caught a white bass like immediately. I was like, oh my gosh, no way. And then it's like, sweet. That might've been just a solo guy. Released him and then threw it again. Caught another one. I was like, doing the air punches, like, we found him. And what's funny is, once again, this was right about as I was about to go home. So I've just fished that little hole hard, probably caught 15, 20. And then it was like, okay, this is getting egregious. I need to go back home to my wife, Lisa, because I've way overfished my welcome, and I had a great day. And yeah, man, it's the white bass. There's something else. They're not huge, but when you find them, they're great. And I think Oklahoma, it's the state fish, right?
I'm not sure. Is it?
I think it might be.
Yeah.
Are they running up in Arkansas?
They just started. So I'm thinking this weekend. So we have our St. Patrick's Day parade here in Hot Springs. It's a big deal. It's the world's shortest parade. I think it's 289 feet or 298 feet or something like that. And so they do this big thing every year for St. Patty's Day. So we're doing that, but I think I'm going to try to get my kids out because the parade is on Sunday. And so we're going to go to church and then go to the parade. And then they call it a 0K. So you're talking about running marathons earlier. It's kind of like the format of a marathon, but it's 298 feet long. And so you get a t-shirt and a medal, and you register, you get your race packet and all that stuff before.
That's
and
perfect.
So yeah, it's hilarious. So we're going to do that. And that they start the festivities at 3 on Saturday. So I'm hoping I'm going to get my kids up early, and we're going to try to run out probably about an hour from here. There's a spot that I know that whenever they run, they are in there heavy. And
really?
So I'm going to try to get on them. And and try to get my daughter on her first kayak fly fishing fish. She got her first fly fish or fish on the fly 2 weeks ago. So I'm hoping that this weekend she's going to get her first fish on the fly on the kayak. So
That would be
I'm hoping
sweet,
so.
man. Hopefully it's good weather too.
Right. I mean, I'm not sure if you could hear the thunder and there's lightning and hail and everything happening right now. I think we're actually in a tornado watch. So,
Really?
yeah,
Oh
hopefully it
man.
doesn't blow out the creeks too much. But we got up to 81 today.
Shoot.
So we're kind of in the middle of that, getting rain, warm
Ooh,
temperatures. The
yeah.
dogwoods are blooming, which is a big indicator. So, it's prime things happening right now to kick off
Oh,
the white bass run. But
dude, they're
hopefully the
running
rivers
for
aren't blowing out.
sure.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, the
super
rivers might
stoked.
be, temporarily blown out, but you might be good.
Yeah,
Because
I sure hope
I guess
so.
the white bass, they're still in there if the river's blown out, right? They're just maybe more holed up.
Yeah, they'll probably be more holed up, maybe go a little bit deeper. My
Yeah.
worry is that if the water's too murky, it's going to be harder, when it comes to fly
Yeah.
fishing. So, um,
Oh, for sure. And it sweeps your fly down river before it can sink and all that stuff. Man,
exactly.
there's a
So,
great video if you're really curious about what the white bass run is like. Not you, Russell. I know you're familiar with it, but maybe a listener who's intrigued by it. Um, I think it's called. There's a guy in Oklahoma who fly fishes, and I want to say his channel name is kind of similar to y'all's, but he's a dude that'll kayak camp, but mostly angle, and it's like wild something, maybe outdoors. But I'll send you a video to include in the show notes. He
okay.
shows the white bass run going on in a Clearwater Creek in Oklahoma that feeds into Lake Tenkiller. And
Hmm.
it's kind of just, it gives you an idea of what it looks like under the water. Because,
I
up
see.
in here in Texas, like most of the places you're fishing white bass run is murky water. So you can't see them.
Yeah.
You're just making educated casts until you find the pod and then you cast at the same place.
Right.
But up there, it's like crystal clear. It's kind of like that creek I did recently, and he shows all the white bass and their mannerisms, which is kind of cool. Good way to learn and see how you would target them. But you can see how they're all lined up right after a rapid they can't get over. And you can see how if there was a rainstorm and the river blew out temporarily, they could get up over that obstacle and move their
Yeah.
way upriver. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But I'll shoot that your way in case people are intrigued. But you aren't allowed to watch that video until after this podcast is over. We got to get that watch time and retention up
Right.
for wildlife outdoors for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing that I've been looking at analytics, and I try not to get deep in analytics because I know it's a wormhole and it'll suck you in, and then that's all you care about. So I try not to look at analytics too much.
But it never
But
lies.
right, it does not, and that is one thing that I was actually impressed at our watch time in comparison to how many people start it and how many people finish it. And
Hmm.
I mean, of course, you're not everybody's going to finish it, and there's not very many people are going to watch halfway through. But I was impressed with how many people we actually do retain. I was kind of shooting low to avoid disappointment, and I was pleasantly surprised. So I was happy with that.
That's awesome,
But
man. Congratulations. It means a lot. I mean, if someone's ever like, what can I do to help the channel? It's just like, dude, if when you watch, I'm not saying you need to, but when you watch a video, just watch the whole thing.
right,
And hopefully it's entertaining enough to where you're compelled to watch the whole thing.
yeah.
But liking, commenting, that doesn't do anything. Like literally, it's all about just watching the whole video.
Exactly. And sharing it,
Because you
obviously helps because you're getting it in front of other people, but it's always, the watch time. You got to get
yeah,
that time in for sure.
it's a double-edged sword with sharing though. And the reasoning being, if you send it to 10 people and those 10 people only watch it for 30 seconds, it's going to tell YouTube it's a bad video.
Yeah,
And so it's got to be like very pointed sharing,
I see.
because it can tell YouTube it's a bad video prematurely, because YouTube's algorithm is very smart. It knows who to serve videos to. And that's why it's kind of like, every time I upload a video and it doesn't perform well, I'm like, okay, I guess it's not that it was a bad video. It just wasn't what my audience or people were looking for.
I see.
So like, for instance, I posted this beautiful kind of like car camping video up in the Oklahoma Ouachitas
Hmm.
last year. And it was a great video, beautiful fall foliage, cool campsite, different style than I normally do. And, it just didn't drive views, which is totally fine because it was something that I enjoy. I'm proud of the video to this day still, but people aren't looking at me to do car camping videos right now.
Yeah.
They're
I
very
watched that video.
interested in,
It was a nice
did
video.
you?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
That
I
was
was
the one
like,
where
hey, it's
you and
pretty
Lisa
cool.
camped in the SUV.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty
I
cool,
liked it.
but people didn't,
Right.
which is all good. But then like you'll have a video go nebular and you're like, oh, it makes sense. Like it's in a cool location. There's strong story because a lot happened. and like a lot of people watched it, and so you're like, okay, people clicked on it and watched it for a long time. It's an intriguing subject, and I never plan my videos around that completely, but it just happens to coincide with like just like an angling trip. You make a big trip down to Florida to chase tarpon, and it just happens to be beautiful, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like I go to Big Bend to kayak camp the Rio Grande River because I want to. And it just so happens I want to do that because it's a stunning place and something that's completely out of this world.
Right.
And then, the more popular a place you go to, potentially the more reach that video could have. But at the end of the day, it's all about reaching people who are totally unfamiliar with that river and the thing you're doing. That's when you get really widespread distribution on YouTube.
I see. And
Which is
that's one
cool.
thing that I was kind of wondering about, and you already kind of explained it, answered the question that I was going to ask is, you hear a
Sure.
lot of people say, oh, well, with the YouTube algorithm, you have to be consistent and you have to post one video a week or this and that. And then I look at yours and it's like, well, you've had times where you don't post a video for 2 months, 3 months, and then your next video still has a lot of viewership. So
Right.
it's interesting to learn how it doesn't have to be because everybody's like consistency, consistency, consistency. And so I try to be consistent, and it's easy with the
Yeah.
podcast because I release an episode every week and I just post it. So it's not like I don't have content going out there, but in terms of my
For
adventure
sure.
videos, it's a few months in between. I'm still learning
Mm-hmm.
how to edit and all that. So that it takes longer than it should to get a video out. But it's a little bit of, okay, well, I have the consistency because I'm putting episodes out every week, but it's awesome to see that there's a little bit more to it, and timing, and the content itself and the location has a lot more to do with it.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I love this question because I think there's a whole lot of terrible advice out there that most people get. Like the most common advice you'll get is terrible. And I have great news though. Like YouTube is pushing smaller creators if you're just starting out more than they ever have before. I mean, that's
Really.
why if you're kind of scrolling through, I usually browse on my TV or on my laptop. I don't watch a ton of YouTube on my phone. I
Hmm.
listen to like podcasts and stuff on my phone, on YouTube. But you'll notice that as of recent, there's a lot more smaller channels being pushed out that might
Hmm.
only have like 15 views on a video or something. And it'll show up in my recommendations. And recommendations is really where that's where you make your bread and butter on YouTube views and stuff. Um, but really, the consistency is just you getting better at making videos.
Yeah.
So it's like they tell you to be consistent and upload 100 videos, and your 101st might pop off, but that's only because you now have the experience of doing 100 videos. If you work a job for 100 days, you're going to be way better at it than you were at day one, right?
Right.
And so naturally, if you're making better videos, the algorithm is going to push you.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, well, that makes total sense. So consistency makes sense because if you're consistently uploading, as long as it's not sacrificing the quality, then that's fine. But at the end of the day, I found for me personally, consistency was actually meaning that I wasn't making as good of videos as I possibly could
Yeah.
because I was constantly chasing uploading that next video. And so there was a season where I was uploading a lot of how-tos and tutorials and gear reviews and stuff like that. And I just found that although I enjoy making those videos, I really do, I enjoy more spending more time on the kayak camping edits to make them as close to the actual experience as it was.
Yeah.
Like through voiceover, through editing appropriately and keeping pacing. And also, like if your mission is to spread, the good word about kayak camping or angling to as many people as possible, then you'll make the best video possible and it'll get distributed. The
Yeah.
only issue is that making a good video is hard, man. Like
It is.
it's tough. And that's why I think you'll look at my channel and I upload every so often because, like it's a hobby for me. Like I'm just like everybody else working a classic job where I'm trying to progress in my career. And, that's why I live in the city, right? Because
Yeah.
this is where the industry I'm in is. And, all roads lead to Houston in the energy industry. And that's what I do.
I
And
see.
so, going out to these wild places, it's just as hard for me to do it as it is anyone else because Houston is arguably the epicenter of no outdoors.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we have good fishing because we have a bunch of mutants in the canals and, some white bass. And if you want to chase redfish in the salt, you can totally do that too. But like,
Yeah.
by no means is it like Hot Springs, which is in one of the most beautiful mountain ranges in the US, right? Like, and even that's hard to get out, right? With life happening, it's tough. But yeah, man, with YouTube, it's all about just getting better and like improving one thing with each video. And I think if I had one bit of advice for you, because you do podcast and adventure videos, I would maybe break it into 2 channels and
Okay.
have your wildlife outdoors podcast channel, and then, do your name, Russell, and then Reynolds, right? Last name?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, blank there for a second. And then like Russell, just like your regular name for your adventures. And that way, neither channel really has a ton of pressure because you're going to be consistent with your uploads on the podcast, but you don't want your adventure videos to be lost amongst all your podcast videos, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of what drives subscriber growth is you have a video that reaches them and they're intrigued and they're like, well, no one has ever subscribed after watching one video, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, I didn't know kayak camping was a thing. I want to go click on this guy's profile. Maybe he has more. And you're like, oh my gosh, there's like 20 kayak camping videos. And so then they'll watch a couple and that's when they subscribe. So when somebody
See,
sees that they're going to be delivered what they came to your channel for, they're more likely to subscribe.
that
If you
makes
have, it's that
sense.
back catalog that kind of convinces them. It's just like sales, like you get your initial lead, but then, what are you going to do to nurture that relationship to close the deal? That's essentially what your back catalog is.
Yeah.
And so
That makes a lot of
consistency can
sense.
also contribute to that, because if you aren't intentionally consistent, then you'll never make a video, right?
Yeah.
But if you're consistent, it's like at some point you'll realize that, okay, I have enough skills or enough cool trips or editing or whatever to be like, I'm gonna spend 2 weeks on this video instead of 1 week. Or like in
Yeah.
my case, like at least a month. If it's a
Mhm.
big trip, like if I'm going to the Buffalo River or something, that's probably a 2 month edit. And
Right.
there just might not be anything from me.
Yeah.
But the thing is, would you rather upload one video every 2 months and that video gets outsized views, or upload 8 videos in 2 months, drive yourself crazy with editing and filming and ideas and stuff, and each of those videos ends up being only 10% of the views that one big video did, right?
Right.
And so you kind of start to see it's like the 80-20 rule, where 80% of your performance comes from like 20% of the videos. Like
Mhm.
for sure I've noticed that, like in
Yeah.
my channel. And honestly, that's kind of freeing, because that means that you don't have to be on that YouTube treadmill constantly,
Yeah.
and you can take creative breathers and be like, all right, I'm not going to edit anything this weekend. I'm just going to go fish. I'm
Yeah.
not going to film at all. I'm just going to have fun. And then you get back in on a Sunday and you hammer out some really good editing and you're like, wow, that worked well.
Yeah. See, that's one thing that I believe in, even in my professional career, is decompressing. If
Yeah.
you're, and I've done a lot of management in the past, and right now I'm not in a management position, but throughout all the management positions that I've held, I always feel like if you treat your workers better, that they're going to perform better for you. And I use that same, ideology with myself. Is if I'm overworking myself, because I make my own schedule for the most part. I mean, I work Monday through Friday, but in terms of projects that I'm working on, scheduling, whether I'm going to be in Texas or Mississippi, Oklahoma, Arkansas, I can schedule that myself. And if I try to overwork myself, I'm far less efficient. So if I stay rested, if I do things to where I'm able to not overwork myself, I'm far more efficient and I get a lot more done. So I kind of take that
Spot
same,
on.
kind of take that same, ideology to myself when it comes to videos too. Like I don't ever want to pressure myself to make sure that I have videos and this and content and this. And, I want to enjoy what I'm doing out there. And that way I can get the message out to other people more than instead of stressing and trying to, oh, well, I got to get this specific shot and stuff like that. So,
Hmm. Yeah, I do totally agree, man. Like your worst work will come when you have to do it, as far as like YouTube stuff goes. So if you're going on a trip and you're like, man, I have to make sure this is a good video. Um, you're trying to make something big out of something that's kind of small. Like if I was to go do a kayak trip here in Houston where it's not overly scenic, you're probably going to actually have a worse time and you're going to end up not even having a video. It's like, just go kayak the creek and then work
right.
on the Buffalo River edit later. It's
Yeah.
like, take the extra time. But you're spot on, man. Like at the end of the day, you got to work hard. And that applies to personal and YouTube life.
Exactly.
But being burnt out is no good spot to be. And I think a lot of people find that with YouTube, because at the end of the day, if you don't love it, then you're going to get burnt out making YouTube videos. I always tell people, like, you aren't going to make any money doing it.
Yep.
So don't expect that.
Exactly.
At best, probably you're going to subsidize your hobby,
Yep.
but there's a lot of misconceptions around that. You know, how much does YouTube pay? Because everybody sees the 1% of YouTubers that are balling out completely out of control. And it's like, oh, wow, everybody must be like that. It's like, no,
No.
it's a labor of love. Like, make sure you enjoy it because it's very
Exactly.
rewarding in other ways. Like the comment section, the Ozark Creek video I just uploaded, it's blown my mind with his performance, but it's like 110,000 views now, which is
Oh, wow.
crazy in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's nuts.
And when I try to think about that and put it into perspective, that is Kyle Field completely sold out on a Saturday. That's how
Yeah,
many people have watched this video. That's crazy, man.
it is.
Like that's absolutely mental to know that you've reached that many people. And you know, if you've only impacted 1% of those, that's 1,000 people
Exactly.
that you've impacted, which is pretty darn cool, right?
Yeah, it is. I couldn't even imagine speaking in front of 100,000 people in person. And I've never even thought about it that way. I think one of our videos, I mean, shorts are, we've had a couple of them hit like 5,000 and stuff in terms of shorts, but in actual
Mm-hmm.
viewership, I think we reached 1,000 on one of our videos. And I was thinking about that. I was like, that's 1,000 people that have seen just some random thing that I decided to film and throw up there. Like it's
Is
crazy
that
to think
crazy?
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it got 5,000 views because people were watching it. You know, they were staying on it. And so then YouTube's like, oh, that's a good short. We're going to distribute that to other people. And so, you know, people are actually watching it because it's performing well.
Yeah.
Like, man, 5,000. I mean, think about 5,000. What's a high school football stadium? Is that 5,000?
Yeah, probably somewhere around that range. Yeah.
So imagine that. That's pretty nuts.
Yeah, it's nuts. And then looking at the watch time of it, having a short with a watch time of over 5 hours, it's like, wait, what? Like
Yeah.
it was a 10-second clip. How does it have 5 hours of viewership? So it's
Yeah.
crazy to look at stuff like that.
It's pretty nuts, man. Yeah.
It is.
It's really, we're in the, I'm really thankful for YouTube. You know, it's making videos has always been something that I absolutely love. And, you know, I've discovered fly fishing creators like Wildfly. I watch every
Mhm.
single one of his videos,
Same.
probably multiple times. Scotty's a really cool dude. I've
Yeah.
never met him. I want to meet him in person. Um, and I'm sure that'll happen at some point. I'd love to have him down to Texas and show him around, maybe do a Devil's River trip because I think you could angle pretty well. But
Yeah.
um, you know, YouTube has improved a lot of people's lives. Mine for sure. There's just so much information there. Like it's the second biggest search engine behind guess who?
Google.
Google,
And
right?
doesn't Google
So
own YouTube? So
yeah, exactly. So
yeah.
Google owns the two biggest search engines. And so it's not going anywhere. And there's so
No.
much information out there. You could be learning how to car camp or, you know, redoing your wood floors. And
Yeah.
then, you know, a couple of videos after that, you're watching how to make coffee or something.
Exactly.
And then
See,
you're
I'm a
on the fly
YouTubeaholic.
fishing.
Yeah,
Oh
I'm a
yeah.
YouTubeaholic. I'm constantly watching something, learning something, trying to, better myself in one way or the other, learn a new skill, watch it for entertainment.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm definitely a YouTubeaholic, so
For sure. And, you know, that stuff you're learning off YouTube applies to daily life and business too.
it
You
does.
know, if you're watching business videos or whatnot, like that's stuff that I can translate into my business job, you know, for the company that I work for, which is pretty cool.
Yeah,
You're like, it isn't
exactly.
completely selfish that I'm watching YouTube so much. But what's really cool is that YouTube TV watch time is like exponentially increasing year over year,
Yeah,
which kind of tells you that it's replacing cable. I mean, it kind of has been for a while, but
yeah,
in a big way, YouTube is getting rid of cable because you can watch so much entertaining stuff without commercials and whatnot. At least I know there's
exactly.
ads, but
Yeah, I
I've
used to
actually
watch
started to
YouTube TV a
remove.
lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, we basically have YouTube TV for sports,
yeah,
but yeah, it's cool, man.
it is.
It's been so much fun. It's a whirlwind. Like the people that you meet. I'm only talking to you because I upload videos on the internet to
Yeah,
strangers, right? Like this is a
yep.
connection that is a product of that.
Exactly.
Um, and you know, like you get to run into a lot of people that share the same hobby, which is cool. So if you're into fly fishing and you create a fly fishing community through your videos, like you have a bunch of best friends in your pocket at all times. You're constantly exchanging ideas via messages and comments, and you're getting
Exactly.
feedback on what, like maybe some technique that you could have improved. You take that feedback, you implement it, and now you're catching hogs for fish. You know,
Right.
meeting up with Cole Rickerson, you know, that was a product of videos. We got to go. He showed us some of his home waters on the Illinois.
Mhm.
That was super rad. Didn't catch a fish the entire time. It was so funny. It was so
I
funny because he had filmed some stuff for. He was going to potentially make a long form video, but he was filming some short stuff because they're a media company full time, and so he was doing
yeah,
some stuff for his partners. And I was just going to film a kayak camping video, and then hopefully I caught a couple fish or something because that was one of my
yeah.
first outings ever fly fishing. And at the end of the video, or at the end of the trip, Cole's like, "Dude, I can't make a video out of this. Like, I'm not going to make a video because we didn't catch a single fish. Like it's, because I know he's guided on that river a couple times, and
Mhm.
it was a perfect storm of conditions that essentially meant that the fish were bedded down.
Yeah.
It was late spring, water was super high, a cold front had kind of blown through, and it just shut off completely. But he still got his short form stuff that he needed, which was good because
That's
that's putting
awesome.
food on the table. But the long form, it was so funny. He's like, "Yeah, dude, I can't. My community are savages. If I make a fishing video and never catch a fish, like
Right.
everybody would roast me." Like, hey, luckily people are watching me to, because I sleep on rocks. I don't have to catch fish.
Yeah, that's kind of how it was when me and Jose went to the Buffalo. We were hoping to film a video, and the winds were I mean, there was 35-mile-per-hour winds. I was anchored in my kayak getting blown upstream. It was insane.
Really?
I was using a intermediate tip on my fly rod and trying to cut through the wind, and on a double haul cast my fly was still landing behind me. I mean, it was ridiculous. I didn't
That's
catch
brutal.
one fish. Jose caught two smallmouth, which just happened to be his first smallmouth, so he was able
Wow.
to catch two small ones. And but yeah, that's all we did. I don't even know how many miles it was, and we camped overnight.
Which
So
put in takeout did you guys use?
I think we put in at St. Joe,
Okay.
and I'm not sure where we took out at.
So you guys were pretty
But
far downstream.
yeah, we were pretty far downstream. That's the only
Nice.
areas that had enough water to float. So
Oh, really?
it was pretty low. Yeah, even right now, I think. Well, maybe with the rain that we've had these past couple of weeks, it's a little higher. But the Buffalo Outdoor Center was saying that they're not even allowing floats or renting kayaks on the Upper Buffalo right now. So
Really?
yeah,
They must
it's been a
not.
little dry.
I'll tell you what, my Texas crew is used to bumping and grinding, so we'd probably be fine. Because I'm looking at the flow rates of the Upper Buffalo, and I'm like, what do you mean it's too low? It's at 90 CFS. That's double what we're used
Right.
to.
Yeah, no, we
Although
we
that's
got
gotten me in trouble
quite a
before.
bit of rain last week and the week before, so it's probably up, but I think it was about 2 weeks ago that they posted that. So they're probably, flowing and rocking and rolling now, but
Oh
yeah, there
yeah,
for a little while they were posting, we're not doing anything on the uppers, so.
nice. Well, I'm going to the Buffalo soon
Oh, you
because
are?
Big Bend has no water. Yeah,
Yeah.
so probably next month. We were supposed to
Nice.
go to Big Bend, but it's literally dry, so can't
Yeah.
do that. My crew has retired from low flow. We did that little Missouri trip, and it was brutal. It took us 3 days to go 8 miles, and at the
Really?
end, the guys were like, "I'm too old to be doing this. Like, we are
Yeah.
retired from low flow. I'm not doing it if it's below 100 CFS. I'm triple digit flow rates only from here on out." um,
Damn. That
but yeah,
sucks.
so our goal is probably to do Ponca
Mhm.
or Boxley. I mean, ideally, I'd like to do Boxley because I've heard they have some fun water below
Yeah.
Boxley. And so hopefully it's rocking and rolling when we go. But I'm really excited, man.
And if y'all go through Ponca, y'all might come across that elk herd too. Be able to get some, good pictures of the elk over there on the banks.
Ooh, that'd be sweet. I might have to bring my 100, 400 lens and
Yeah.
capture some close ups. That'd be sick.
With my 70 to 200 on my way back from Eureka Springs, we went through Ponca and come across them, and during a snowstorm, and it was freaking awesome, dude. It was so cool to see them out there in the snow.
That's crazy, man. That's a special part. I can't wait to see it in person. I mean, of all the places that people have yelled at me to go, it's the Buffalo. Like
Really?
every time I upload a video and it's not the Buffalo, people are like, "Why haven't you gone to the Buffalo yet?" Like
I bet you
Illinois is
got a lot
cool,
of that
but
on this last one because you were close
yeah,
enough.
yeah. It's funny. I got a lot of Illinois and Arkansas people, or it's not Illinois, Missouri,
Hmm.
which was kind of cool. I guess the Ozark people that are interested in the Ozarks, like it's kind of got spread to them. But what was kind of funny is more people than you'd think said, "Well, that's not the Ozarks. It's not in Arkansas or Missouri."
Well, the
And
Ozarks
I'm like, "Well,
actually even
technically,
goes into
can
Kansas.
yeah." I was like, "Kansas technically has the
Yep.
Ozarks too, so you're just flat out wrong. Like,
Exactly.
factually speaking, that is wrong."
Yep.
But okay,
The Ozark
cool,
Plateau is Arkansas and Missouri mainly, and then it goes over into northeast Arkansas, and then in the southern corner of Kansas. So
nice. Yeah,
yeah,
it's. I mean, it's beautiful. It's crazy. I didn't realize that. I mean, my wife Lisa is from Tulsa.
Really?
And so for the first many years that we would visit her parents that still live up there, um, I didn't realize that beautiful, amazing kayaking was an hour east of their house.
Yeah.
Like for me to drive to the suburbs in Houston is an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So to think that from their house an hour away is the Ozarks. When I found that out, I was like, oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Yeah. And fun fact
And
about the Ozarks is a lot of people call them the Ozark Mountains, and they're actually not mountains.
yeah, the
So,
hills.
well, no, they're tall enough to be mountains.
Oh,
But the Ozarks it's actually a plateau. So it's the Ozark Plateau, and then there's mountain ranges on the plateau. So you have the
oh,
Boston
gotcha.
Mountains and stuff like that. The St. Joe Mountains or St. Francis Mountains and the Boston Mountains are on top of the Ozark Plateau. And so whenever you have these
Interesting.
valleys, they're actually just washed away from a plateau. So it's actually not even the Ozark Mountains.
Interesting. So it's
Yeah.
essentially a bunch of mesas or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, because to be a mountain has to be from base to top 2,000 feet, not
Yes.
including just like general elevation gain. And there
Yeah.
is not one of those in the Ozarks, is there?
Yes. So there's two mountain ranges, the Boston's and the St. Francis, and those are both on the northwest side of Arkansas, up there,
I
Fayetteville,
know they
Bentonville
call them
area.
mountains, but
But
are they technically mountains?
I believe
Because
they are.
there's the Poto. Is that Poto in Oklahoma? And it's in the Ouachita
Yes.
Poto
And
Mountain. It's like
that's a plateau.
it's the biggest hill in America. It's like
It's called.
100.
I talked about it
It's
on
like
one of the
100.
previous podcasts, and it's 1,999 feet. And I called it something that I called it Sugarloaf, and it's not Sugarloaf. And I looked it up afterwards, and I don't remember what it was called now.
All right, let's see.
It is Kavanaugh Hill.
Ah,
Yeah, Kavanaugh Hill, and it's 1,999 feet in elevation. So it is the
so
tallest hill in the
funny.
world, and it's actually right there on the
Interesting.
Arkansas-Oklahoma border. So
Is it really?
yeah, it's kind
Tell
of
you
by
what, it's
Fort
beautiful
Smith.
out there.
It is. It's
I think I've
gorgeous.
driven past it once
Really?
because we drove from Big Cedar. Yeah, I think it's called Big Cedar for that camping video last year. We were in the Ouachita and we drove through kind of like Broken Bow, Big Cedar up to Tulsa.
Yeah.
And so I think we passed it.
I think you
Which
probably
was kind of cool. I was like,
Yeah.
dang, that thing looks huge.
But yep, it's not a mountain.
Yeah. Well, you honestly, like the Ouachita, I think if I could choose one place to go, like do you ever play this game? If you had one place to go for the rest of your life to pursue outdoors, where would you go? I think for me, I would do the Ouachita.
I'd probably go somewhere in Idaho. Yeah. I don't know what it is. I've never even been to Idaho, so I can't really. That's just kind of wishful thinking, I guess. But
Okay.
there's just
What
something
other
about
places
Idaho.
have you been near to it?
I have not been out. Colorado is probably the closest, other than Seattle or maybe Northern California. So I haven't been too close to Idaho. But everything that I've seen and heard and looked up is it's a hidden gem. It's out west, but it's not as populated by outdoorsmen as Wyoming and Montana and stuff like that. But it has similar landscapes, similar species when it comes to fishing.
For sure.
The temperatures aren't as cold as like North Dakota, as
True.
regularly. And I'm from Alaska originally, so I mean, I guess cold's in my
Fairbanks,
blood.
right?
Yep, from Fairbanks. So, I do love the cold, but I don't know. There's just something about Idaho that I don't know. I want to go.
It's cool. I highly recommend it. It's beautiful. I always hear, I've never been to Stanley. I've been to Sun Valley to go skiing, but I've heard Stanley in the summertime is hard to beat. It's right. It's the Sawtooth Mountains,
I see.
which are beautiful. And I think there's tons of public land and fishing and rivers that you can go pursue, but I've heard that's the spot to go from people. Watch Drew Sims is an overlanding video creator.
Mm-hmm.
Check out his videos. He makes some beautiful stuff and he's done Stanley quite a few times.
Okay.
I want to say winter and summer, but yeah, he goes some really cool places. It's kind of one of those things where you see where he goes and you're like, okay, well, I need to add that to my list.
Right.
I need to add that to my list and that one too.
Have you ever heard of Destination Adventure out of Canada?
No, I don't think so.
So he is just one guy that travels, and he has this rig that he pretty much can go anywhere with it. And I think one of his most recent videos, he tested it at like -40 degrees Fahrenheit or something like that. And so he can pretty much survive anywhere in that thing. And he goes the craziest places, and he'll boat to places, hike to places, drive to places. And
Oh,
he's just
cool.
a film enthusiast, so he gets a lot of awesome footage and really encapsulates the feeling that he experiences out there. So I think you'd
Nice.
probably
I'll have to
like his
check him out.
videos. But
I just opened up a new browser tab, so I will be watching those at some point, probably this weekend.
right, I go on binges of his occasionally. If I have like a long drive or something, I'll just throw it up, and I'm not watching it as much as I am listening to it. But if I'm at a stoplight or something, I'll look over and kind of take a look at the scenery. But yeah, I'll kind of have his stuff on play there for a while I'm driving. So
Dude, yeah, that's a good way to do it. Passes the time, for
yeah,
sure. Especially if you're
exactly.
doing a lot of traveling. Sounds like you do
Yeah,
to
I
all those
do.
different states. Is that
Exactly.
mostly driving?
Yeah, mostly driving. I don't
Yeah,
ever really fly anywhere, but a lot of my work has been mainly local here in Hot Springs or Pine Bluff, which is
cool.
about an hour and a half away. So, I do
Nice.
have some projects coming up this year that are going to be in Mississippi. So I'll probably spend a lot of time over there in the Vicksburg area. So I just mainly have one point that I wanted to talk about. We kind of have a limit on these episodes on how far we can go, and we're getting close to that. But I wanted to talk to you about remote designs and kind of talk about how it came about and where you see it going.
Sure, man. Yeah, great. So, Remote Designs, for those that don't know, is a dry bag company that I started kind of through the YouTube channel, and with the emphasis that Mother Nature loves to destroy your gear out in nature. And so, we make dry bags and equipment that you can use to protect it from that. And so that's kind of like the most basic thing. But how it came up is, through the YouTube videos. So started filming kayak camping, and then I was about 3 years into making videos and had, started to gain traction there. And, through making videos, I was doing the kayak camping stuff and then also the gearless videos. And in every single video that you post, you generally will post links as well. So some of those links would be a list of gear and things that I use and I have found useful. And so what happens is people will click that link to that product and then, potentially buy it or not. Well, when you have thousands of people visiting a channel over the course of a year or something, you kind of get to see shopping behavior. Like whenever somebody clicks on your product links, it's like, well, which one are they clicking the most? Are they actually purchasing stuff? And so what I was noticing is that my videos were selling multiple dry bags per day for other companies. And I was like, well, I guess, I'm kind of obsessed with dry bags because I own about 15 of them, and I've used them, and I made a dry bag review video and went as far as to recommend an empty protein container can be used for like, splash resistant storage if you're on a budget and or just trying to be resourceful. And so I was noticing that like, okay, we're selling quite a few of these things. Wouldn't it be kind of a fun project to bring one to life and kind of like figure out manufacturing design, and then the riskiest part is making the bulk order and then selling them. I was like, it was also COVID had
Mhm.
hit, and so there was just some time to work on passion projects that you might not have otherwise had. And so what I did is I spent an inordinate amount of hours trying to track down a good manufacturing partner to work with. So whenever that happens, so you order a bunch of product and you kind of see, all right,
You're good.
which manufacturers actually have good quality and could bring your vision to life. And so, went through all that, ended up designing something up and ordered a bulk shipment of 300 of them. I was like, oh man, like that's a lot.
Mhm.
Am I going to be able to sell through this? Like, are there people that are interested enough in dry bags, especially this design, that they would show up in droves and support, which would be, honestly really cool. It's like, at the end of the day, uh, I'm sure these will sell over time. It may take a year, it may take 5 years, but I feel like it's a pretty safe bet based on the Amazon data that I had been using to kind of formulate a business plan.
Mhm.
And so launched it. And what was super cool is that I showed the process of doing R&D and field R&D in my video. So people could kind of get an idea of like, okay, he didn't just order a bunch of backpacks and he's going to turn around and sell them without actually testing their utility in the field.
Yeah.
In the videos that we do, like we kind of pursue rougher water,
Mhm.
still for sure wreck kayak level, but rougher water. And so people could see the testing process and kind of bringing the company to light. You're like, oh, cool. Maybe I'll order one up and see what it's like in person whenever he launches them. So I ended up launching them. I think it was like August of 2020 or something like that. Yeah, it was August 2020. And, much to my surprise, like there was just a ton of support right out the gate. It didn't sell out immediately, but it sold out, I think, within 3 to 5 months from
Oh
there, which I
wow.
was like, oh my gosh, that completely blows me away. And it was at that point that I was like, okay, well, this is a thing. And that was even in August when most people are starting to think about football instead of the outdoors, because, kayaking fishing is largely, you might not realize it, but, views and purchasing habits are largely seasonal with the outdoors.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, let's get two colors this time. Let's go crazy with it. And so I had the green. The green worked really well. And then I wanted to add tan because I know we have a lot of sportsmen that like that kind of like the earth tones, and the green had some blue accents in it. And so I was like,
Mhm.
all right, we're going full earth tones. We're going to go tan and see how well it's received. So, keep in mind, like you have to order 300 of each color. You can't just have a bunch of colors, or maybe
Yeah.
order 5 of green, 5 of tan and test something. Like you have to go full commit and full send. And so I did a few updates to the bag and, kind of took the feedback that we had from the previous users. And, because when you send 300 backpacks out in the world, you can get some feedback if you ask for it.
Mhm.
And so, it was all like, okay, if just small things here and there, you probably won't notice a huge difference between the initial backpacks and even into year 3. Um, but yeah, so ordered 600 of those, and I was like, all right, that this is 300 felt like a full send, but this feels even crazier. So that was for the 2021 season, and it was even more supported, which was really cool. And we were making some good videos at the time, and one thing that was important for me, another reason why I started Remote Designs, is a lot of YouTube creators find funding through partnerships with brands,
Mhm.
and I've never, like, for me to do that, for me to go out of my way and integrate a brand into the videos, like it's a lot of extra work because you have to get the product, test it out, make sure it's something you can stand behind. And there's just so much that goes into it that people would never understand. And I'm not opposed to it. It's just so much work
Yeah.
for honestly not that much reward, when it comes down to it. And so Remote Designs was kind of like the in-house sponsor for the videos. It was a way to kind of, use the backpack revenues to reinvest into inventory, and then, spend that money on going on trips and purchasing camera gear. Um, and so, like, to me, I was like, I've hit the lottery. Like I've hit the infinite money glitch for my hobby. Like I'm not, I'm not making any money personally because I'm reinvesting it completely back into the business,
Yeah.
which is cool and unnecessary for me to take a salary or anything like that, because, I work a normal job like the rest of us. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the dream. Not only do you have enough sales to like reinvest in getting better each year, I was like, man, this is such a good fit. And I think people really enjoyed the connection between the YouTube channel and the backpacks. And to this day, it's still just the YouTube channel and I guess Instagram that sells it. Like I don't have any retail partners. I try to keep it all kind of under my roof.
Mhm.
I did have a fly shop, the fly trap down in Rockport that carried the bags for a while when I had the old style, and they were really cool people to work with. And yeah, so a couple years went by. I was selling a bunch of backpacks, and it was super fun. It was super rad to see people out using them and sharing pictures, kind of like you guys did. And that was one of the most rewarding parts. I was like, all right, I've always been passionate about, I want a dry bag that's a roll top. And
Mhm.
so I wanted to expand my product line and kind of change it up. So we had run the same backpack for essentially 3 years, and it had been doing really well, but I wanted to kind of pivot and pursue new design language and test something out. And so that's when the roll top dry bag came out, and also the zipper duffel. So using the German T-zip duffel, which is just literally perfectly made to be a boat bag for kayaks or maybe a drift boat or an inflatable like flycraft or something like that. And so, yeah, our current offerings are the roll top backpack and the duffel. And what's really cool is I use them in the videos, and people kind of get an idea that, hey, these things are meant to be used and abused, and they're functional. And honestly, like if you ever have a problem, you just reach out to me personally. It's like my personal email address that sends you your order confirmation. And so if you ever have an issue, like, and there aren't many. I mean, if you sell a good product, like there just aren't many issues that arise,
Yeah.
just shoot me a note, and I'm always here. I can be reached. I'm pretty easily Googled because of my name. And there's many ways to get in touch. And so it's like, I'd like to think we have the best customer service out there, because if you buy a backpack 3 years ago and say your zipper blew out, um, without hesitation, I will either refund you your money or send you whatever product we have on hand. If you don't like the styles we're currently offering, I'm giving you a refund. I don't care. it's you will find that if you have good customer service, like you can create so much more loyal customers. And you know what? They may want a refund, but they're like, hey, I'm just going to keep an eye out for products you may release in the future and I'll support then because right now
Yeah.
I'm working on a sling and a hip pack and I'm really stoked about it because I'm kind of pursuing technology that's not very widely used in
Mm-hmm.
packs right now. It's not a zipper, and I'm really stoked about kind of what this could do for fishing packs and kayaking packs. But that's kind of like the quick and dirty remote designs. I feel like it would be we can spend hours talking about, but you can kind of see one of my storage shelves. So I'm just in a spare bedroom in my house. This is the pack room that we're at. So the desk in front of me. This is where I do my packing and I keep product in the garage and on the pack shelves behind me. So yeah, it's very homegrown. And what's really cool is, we have good sell through and we get to reach a lot of people and get to see the content that they share with it because it's one thing to see an order come through and like you always see their name and stuff, but then to actually see like, oh wait, I kind of recognize that name, like a photo you're tagged in, like I kind of recognized that Jared name that I sent
Yeah.
one to Missouri. And you see him out there fishing with it. And you're just like, oh, this is just so full circle. It's amazing. But yeah, right now we're just focused on. Let's say we're focused on me and my wife
Mm-hmm.
are the only people involved in it. We're the marketing team. She's the accountant. And when I say marketing team, my YouTube videos,
Yeah.
it's definitely a cottage thing. But really happy with our manufacturing. They do a great job, and as far as quality goes, and yeah, man, if there's any particular questions you had about remote designs, I apologize. That was another long-winded answer to your
No,
question.
it answered any questions that I would have had. I'm glad to hear you are bringing a hip and a sling pack because that is something that um, I will definitely buy when you release because I have the zipper backpack, I have the two roll tops, 20 liters, and then I have the duffel.
Mm-hmm.
I will be getting the 28 liter soon, I'm pretty sure. And then once you come out with the hip or a sling, like I'm definitely getting that because there's just something about having something right in front of you, whether it be for a phone or for a camera or something that you can just have so readily accessible right there. And I think at one point, did you have a prototype hip pack
So I sold hip
or
packs for about 2 years,
okay?
and it was the zipper closure and kind of
Mhm.
like that older style. And
Yeah,
so whenever I started down the new design language, I was like, okay, I actually have some prototype hip packs with zippers,
I
and I was
see.
like, oh man. But I also have a few other packs with kind of this different closure system.
Hmm.
I was like, man, I feel like I could bring that to the hip packs. And so right as I was about to release hip packs, I was like, nope, we're gonna hold off on that and we're gonna do it right. It's kind of like the same philosophy with my videos, right?
Yeah,
It's like, you know what? I'm not gonna release something before it's ready because once you do, like you do reach a considerable amount of people. And if you lose their trust, then you never get it's so easy to it's so hard to build trust and it's so easy to lose it. And
yeah,
also like I don't feel a ton of pressure to bulk up on inventory because I don't think, you know, unless you're sleeping under a rock, you kind of understand that everybody's wallets are really pressed right now.
yeah,
Like inflation has gone wild. Groceries are insanely expensive. Cars, home payments, rent, everything is nuts.
yeah.
And so you've seen a big pullback kind of in consumer demand. And we of course have seen that with remote designs as well, which
Hmm.
is to be expected. If we didn't, I'm like, well, what's going on?
Exactly.
Is the fly fishing community as truly as wealthy as, as we all thought? No, it's certainly fly fishing is every man can do it.
Yeah,
It's not honestly too bad on the wallet unless you're doing huge trips out to Montana and stuff. But
exactly.
yeah, man, kind of taking this year to sell through inventory and redesign,
That's awesome.
which I think is great. And it can turn into a lot of logistics if you're redesigning and ordering and putting out videos and all this other stuff because it all takes
Right.
time.
That it
Um,
does.
but yeah, I
So,
mean, I'm super stoked. And the sling pack is something that I kind of told myself I'd never do, and that was before I got into fly fishing.
mhm,
And it wasn't until I started talking with fly fishermen, started to do it myself and understand the mechanics of a good fly fishing pack that's also a good kayaking pack,
mhm,
that I was like, oh, a sling could actually be a great addition to the lineup.
right.
And so I started, down that path late last year.
Awesome.
And so, yeah, I
Yeah,
can definitely contribute a lot of that to angling.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that that's coming, because that is one thing, especially when you're a fly fisherman. A conventional fisherman, you're not really, especially if you're not doing it on kayak or anything like that, you're not using too much. But when it comes to fly fishing, there's a lot more movement that comes into it. And with the remote design zipper backpack that I have, I keep my net in the side pocket. And
Hmm.
there's been a few times that, the net has kind of impeded a motion that I need in order to get
Yeah.
under a limb, or a non-typical cast to get my fly where I need to get it. And so if I could find a different way to hold my net and then have a sling pack on the front where I can reach my flies without having to sling the backpack around and get my stuff out of it, I feel like that would be great for fly fishermen. So
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that backpack plus like the front hip pack is
mhm.
a low key underrated way to go fishing. Like if you're going to go out for the full day, you
Exactly.
might look like a goober, but I probably it works so good.
Hell, I don't care what I look like. And then another issue
Yeah,
that I have
same.
is the waders that I have don't have a front pocket on them. So if I have my phone, it's inside my waders, and I'm trying to reach into my waders and find my phone. If I just want to get a quick snapshot, I'm not going to pull out a GoPro or my DSLR for a long-eared sunfish. But if it's colored up, I'd
Right.
like to at least have a picture of it. So
For sure. Oh, 100%. Yeah, and you'll be really interested to hear offline kind of just things that you're looking for in packs,
mhm.
because one of the best parts about being a one man shop is that you really can listen to what people are saying about your stuff and make pivots,
Yeah,
year to year. Um,
well,
that's
I can
tougher. That's a little tougher to do for a big company because you got to get levels of management approval. But
exactly.
if tomorrow you sent me something and you're like, hey, this just does not work for fly fishermen, you need to get rid of that feature and add this. Like that could be here ASAP, on the next
Awesome.
shipment for whenever it's ordered. So I would love to hear that because I don't know a ton. Yeah, I'm about a year into fly fishing, and I do probably more than most experienced fly fishermen, but I'm still trying to catch up for days on water.
Right.
You can't replace time on water. And
Yeah.
so,
Well, I will happily give you
yeah,
any feedback that I have, or anything that I'm looking for in a product as a fly fisherman. I'll happily, tell you, and hopefully you can figure something out for that, and solve a lot of other people's
dude,
issues they have with other products.
for sure, man. It was kind of funny. I was listening to this podcast, and this dude's like, if you have a product based business and you ask people, never ask people for feedback, which I just did. He said, ask for advice, because when you use language like ask for advice, you put yourself on the same team.
Mhm.
Whereas if you ask someone for feedback, you kind of put them in a critical role and they might feel like they have to come up with something critical. But if you just ask for advice, it's like two dudes talking, right? So I was like, oh, that's kind of like, it's amazing how wordplay is so
Yeah.
relevant, right?
Yep.
So advice, I'll ask for advice.
Well, I will give you some pointers whenever we're off the podcast, for sure, of things that I'm looking for.
Right on, dude. Well, I appreciate that because you live in the heartland of smallmouth bass, baby, up there in the
Dude, I
Washita.
love it. I'm so ready to get out on them. I haven't been smallmouth fishing yet this year, and I will be soon. Speaking of which, you were talking about take in and put out points, or put in and take out points earlier.
Yeah, I
Have
still call them
you
different things each time.
right? Have you ever been to a place called Dragover here, kind of close to Hot Springs?
I watched a video about it. Johnny Wild just put out a video like
Hmm.
a week ago, and I remember watching that. And like, man, that looks perfect. It looks really fun. Is that good fishing out there?
Dude, it's great fishing, and on top of it, it is so easy to do, on a solo trip when you don't have a shuttle. So that's, a lot of
Right.
things here. If you're going out to the Caddo or the Washita or the Little Missouri, there's a lot of areas where if you don't have a way to shuttle, it makes it pretty difficult. And so,
Hmm.
whenever we did the Cossatot, that was one thing. It's like, well, we were wanting to backpack this 12-mile trail, but it's going to make it difficult because we only took one vehicle. So
Right.
there's a lot of areas like that it's harder
That
if you
makes it
don't have a
tough.
shuttle. Yeah, for sure. So, but with Dragover is you end up not even a half a mile from where you put in. And I think it's like
Hmm.
4 miles or 5 miles on the river, and it's less than half a mile away. And so normally what
Yeah,
I'll
it's
do
pretty
is,
cool. It's like a giant horseshoe.
yeah, that's exactly what it is. And there's good
So sick.
smallmouth in there. I've seen people catch carp out of there. There's largemouth bass. There's spotted bass. There's all sorts of different brim. There's gar in there. So there's a bunch of species, but it is just gorgeous. And even if you just want to go out and float recreationally, it's a great float for that. There's good areas. There's islands you can stop on and banks that you can stop on. And it's gorgeous. So if you're ever in the area, you should definitely check it out.
You're killing me, Russell. I want to go tomorrow.
Right.
That'd be so fun. Yeah. As soon as I saw it, it was one of those where you see the video and you're just like, Yep, that's added to the list. I want to go do
Yep.
that,
So
which
if
is
you
cool.
had one place that if money didn't matter, time didn't matter, nothing mattered, but you were going to go film a video tomorrow, where would it be?
Mm, if none of that mattered, where would I go film? It's hard to say because, I'll say a place. I promise I won't balk, but it's probably a place I haven't been.
Hmm.
But one place that I want to go this summer, and I probably will film a video there, is in the Flaming Gorge area of northern Utah.
Hmm.
And so the Green River runs all the way through Wyoming. It picks up water from the Wind Rivers and a bunch of other mountains in Wyoming and Utah, and then it goes into the Flaming Gorge Reservoir, which is this giant, beautiful lake. And that the dam outlet, the tailwater, is in Dutch John, Utah, and it's a world class fishery. But I mean, you know me, I'm there to kayak. I,
Yeah.
I may not even take a fishing pole, but they have these huge browns and all this stuff, and it's a beautiful place. And so I kind of want to do a multi-day kayak camping trip down through there because it's just a beautiful red rock canyon and it looks pretty. And another really important thing now, because I mean, this is a whole different rant I won't get into, but basically the national park system just made it illegal to make YouTube videos. And
Really?
so, yeah, so don't film a video in a national park because you could face like a huge fine.
Wow.
Yeah. One man crew doesn't matter. So, like, I can't make videos in national parks anymore,
That's
which is
crazy.
so dumb. So, like, me and my buddies can't go, or I just won't film. But
Yeah,
like, I love filming, so I'll just go
exactly.
somewhere else. So the Green River, it runs through this beautiful canyon for many number of miles, and there's like existing campsites along the way, but it's all completely primitive. So it's basically just an area where people have camped before. It's a pretty popular stretch of river, but the reason I would say there's no cost is because it'd be pretty expensive to get up there. Actually, wait. I watched a video in Iceland. There was a really epic looking place in Iceland. Maybe I do that. I don't know.
Right.
Can't go wrong. But probably the most realistic one is the one in Utah. So look up Dutch John, Utah,
Dutch
and
John.
you'll
I'll look it
see
up.
some. I can't believe you haven't heard of it,
I
man.
haven't
Like
actually.
it's like one of the elite Western places to go fishing.
Well, I'm definitely gonna
It
look it
is
up.
phenomenal looking.
If I had to pick a place, I would probably pick somewhere. I've always wanted to go to Norway. I don't know what it is,
Ooh,
but I
go to the
want to go to
fjords.
Norway, or somewhere in the Appalachian Trail, in the mountains.
Yeah.
Small water, catching native brook trout. Like those
Which
are the
section,
two
northern or
things.
southern?
Probably northern.
Yeah, up in
Yep.
Maine.
Yep. Going
Maine
up
is
there, and
cool.
I've never been. I think the furthest north on um, the east side of the country I've been is the southern side of Virginia. So,
Okay,
and
that's
it's all been
beautiful.
coastal.
Virginia is beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Maine is weird. It's so lush.
Really.
It's just like a different hue of green. It's the most rich looking green you've ever seen. And a lot of the water is stained with tannins, and it's so pretty.
Really. The only information or videos or anything I've seen about Maine is anything that John B has done up at Camp Claw.
Yeah.
But other than that, I haven't really seen too much about Maine.
Hey, man, that's the king of consistency right there, man. John
Dude,
B
yes.
he is just, when so many people stop their craft, he treats it like a job. I mean,
Yep.
he has been so consistent.
And
And
it's
it's
crazy. I don't
clearly,
even know how he fits. Like, I mean, he's in Peru, and then he's in Brazil, and then he's in Dallas, and then he's in Florida, and then he's going from Florida
yeah.
up to New York. Like, I don't even know how he does it.
He's got it figured out. And
Yeah.
sometimes I like to think he's seen some of my videos because I remember I know his Caleb. I don't know how to pronounce Caleb's last name, but Caleb is his cinematographer and editor.
Hmm.
And so I connected with him, and he's watched some of my videos. So I wonder if John B has watched some of my videos. That'd be like one of the biggest compliments I could receive because they
Dude, that
did
would
a
be
kayak
awesome.
camping trip on the Guadalupe.
Hmm.
And that was after I had posted one in that similar section. I mean, he did it, whatever, a year or two later.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I wonder if like one of my videos kind of opened up his eyes to like, oh, hey, we could kayak camp and fish and
Right.
make it about fishing too. And so it's
That would
like,
be awesome.
hey, maybe that'd be kind of cool.
I've actually reached out to him via email and haven't heard back, but I'm kind
Oh,
of,
really?
I would love to get him on the podcast just to, pick his brain in terms of how he plans these trips, because, most fishermen, when they're out filming videos, kind of like, with Cole Rickerson, how he said he's not going to put out a video because he didn't catch anything. So I wonder how many videos John B films where he doesn't catch anything, or if he just has, his skill honed to where he's catching something every time. And, he
Yeah.
does stuff with Guggen Squad, and he's always, they do the competitions with Lake Fork Guy and all them. And then he does his own stuff, and he's out of the country and he's all over the country. And
Hmm.
I don't think that he wouldn't put out a video if he doesn't catch anything. I think he's just so good at his craft that he's catching stuff.
I think it's that because he's so genuine. He comes off as super genuine, and I'm sure you can't be in front of the camera that much and not
Right.
end up ultimately just being yourself.
Yeah.
But he seems so genuine. And if you watch his Devil's River video, he basically didn't catch anything for the first day.
Mm-hmm.
But he still included it, and then he ended up getting on some fish.
Yeah.
But the Devil's is known for being a place where you just absolutely rip some lips.
Yeah.
And he wasn't catching them, and he still included the trials and tribulations. And if people are filming videos where they don't catch fish and not making videos, people get skunked all the time, myself
Yeah.
included.
Yep.
Probably way more than when actually catching fish. And so showing the struggle and telling the story through that, like, people want to see the ups and the downs.
Exactly.
And you'll probably honestly get more views because you'll have something to fight for. You're working harder to catch that fish because you're not catching fish.
Yep.
Like,
And
it's
more
cool
relatable.
to watch oh yeah. It's cool to watch someone rip fish out, one after another, but it's kind of like, all right, dude, I've seen you catch 3 fish in this hole, move on to the next one. Like, this is it's not as cool for me to watch you catch the same fish, seemingly the same fish over and over again as it is in person. I'm sure it's epic.
Exactly.
But yeah, like, I think that's a really cool component you could add into your videos.
Yeah.
Sucking.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, especially when it comes to fly fishing. As you're always going to get something caught on your back cast, and you're not going to make the cast that you want. I've hooked myself. Luckily, I wasn't filming that day. I went fishing at the dam on Christmas Day. It wasn't last year, but the year before, and it was like 20-something degrees outside, and it was windy, and I was at the dam, and I was fishing with a articulated 1/0 and size 2 circus peanut that I tied up. And I was trying to get out closer to the dam in this deep hole, and there's striper that run up there and stuff. And so, I was double haul casting, and the wind blew just right, and I got both hooks into my shoulder, both past the barb, and it got into the muscle, and my muscle was just twitching. And there were some guys working at the dam because it's a power generating dam up there for Entergy. And so there was 2 guys there, and I said, hey, can you push these hooks through? Because I knew when I got home, I wasn't going to be able to get them through. And so one of the guys was like, no, man, I'm squeamish. I can't. And the other guy grabbed his nines, his lineman's pliers, and he grabbed the hook and he just shoved them through. And I could just feel my skin stretching. And then I finally felt it broke through, and he did it on both of them. And I came home and clipped it off with some side cutters and pulled it out. And it was tough. Part of me kind of wishes I was filming.
That's brutal. How long was that drive?
I think it's 16 minutes from there to my house, so it wasn't too bad.
Okay, well, that's a viral video that you could have had.
Right. So, but it would have
been
funny to
hooked.
watch.
Yeah, especially if you had like one of those third-person cameras where you see the hook actually fly into your arm.
Right.
Oh gosh.
Dude, that
that'd
nuts.
That'd be nuts. Well, I'm glad it turned out not too bad. That sounds horrible. I don't know if, especially at the moment, it's like the hook won't go through your skin because there's so much resistance. Like, dude, I don't know. I feel like I'm messing something up.
Yeah. He was. I told him, I said, man, you're just gonna have to push it through. He didn't want to, and I said, I'm not gonna get it out if you don't. And so I would really appreciate it. And he's like, are you sure? I said, just push it through. And he
just do it, man.
Right through. And it hurt, but I'm glad that he was able to push it through, because if I would have gone home, I wouldn't have been able to get it out myself. I would have had to go to the hospital, and I didn't want to do that. So
brutal.
Thankful
Absolutely
for
brutal, man. And no tetanus, right?
Yeah,
all
no
good there?
tetanus. Yeah, it was all clean and everything like that. And it was actually a fly that I tied up the night before. So it's not like it had any rust or anything on it either. It was, brand new fire hole, hook. So
best case scenario.
Turned out better than it could have, for sure.
Right on, man.
So
yeah, I luckily have not had a bad hooking yet, but I know it's coming.
Yeah, it's only
it's going to happen right when there's a giant fish right in front of me. I'm about to sight cast it, and then you're just going to hook my ear or something.
Well, the ears are the easy ones, because you can just rip those out. It hurts, but It's the skin and the muscle that you want to stay away from. So if you only get your ear, then you made it out good.
Yeah, or stepping on a treble. Oh my gosh,
I've never done that, and I hope I don't ever do that.
I see some of those guys on bass boats walking around barefoot. I'm just like, are you sure? There's a lot of hooks on that boat there, brother.
Yeah. It's like you're using baits with 2 treble hooks on them, and you're walking around barefooted. You got some stones.
For sure.
Exactly. So we're coming up on time, man, and I feel like we could just continue and continue and continue. So maybe we have another episode coming, and maybe maybe in the next year or so you could hop on again and we can cover a few more things, because I feel like we could just do a whole nother episode right now.
Absolutely.
But I really appreciate you getting on. I feel like we didn't even really get much into the Gatewood side of stuff. We just talked more about filming and fishing. So I know there's a lot more under there.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I guess that's a really good point. I guess the story of how I got into kayaking kind of shares a little bit into my personal life, but you're right. Everybody who watches my videos still knows just as little about me as when they started watching this podcast. Yeah, well, maybe next episode we do that, and we'll circle back up and get online and have another conversation, because this was super fun, Russell. I wish Jose could have been a part of it, but
right. Well, maybe next time he'll be able to hop on.
We'll tell him to get his tail to the city, get to a Starbucks or something, and
right.
hop on.
Ain't that the truth? But that'll work. Well, I really appreciate you hopping on, and to the listeners, if y'all made it to the end, I appreciate y'all listening, and we'll catch y'all next time.
This has been Wildlife Outdoors. Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook at Wildlife Outdoors and on Instagram at wild.life.outdoors. Let's go live life on the wild side.